Howdy, folks. Welcome to Panel Pursuit, where stories come to life. Let's dive in.
He was the most powerful man in his world. But power couldn't save him from emptiness. Reborn in a realm of beasts and magic, Arthur Lewin awakens with the mind of a king and the body of a child. Gifted, ruthless, evolving faster than anyone can stop him. But in a world where power is everything, even kings must bleed. He has one chance to reshape this world, or watch it collapse again. This time, he won't fall as a king. He'll rise as a legend.
The story kicks off and tells us about a king who had already conquered countless battles and etched his name deeply into history. Yet, despite all his accolades, his life ended under mysterious circumstances. When the king finally reopens his eyes, he's shocked not by grandeur, but by the humble, modest surroundings he's awakened to. Instead of royal opulence, he sees the warm smile of Alice, his compassionate mother, and the lively charm of Reynolds, his charismatic but occasionally immature father. The era he's reborn into feels undeniably primitive. Weeks of careful observation convince the king he has grasped everything this simpler world has to offer, until reality hits him squarely in the face. The revelation comes when Alice casually uses healing magic to fix a wound inflicted by Reynolds' reckless antics. At that moment, the king realizes his assumption couldn't be further from the truth. He knows practically nothing about this fascinating realm. Months pass, and once capable of crawling, the king begins a nightly routine of sneaking from his crib, devouring every book he can lay his tiny hands on. Each nocturnal escapade deepens his knowledge of a world governed by three powerful kingdoms: Elenoir, the mystical elven realm hidden deep in lush forests; Darv, the sprawling subterranean empire inhabited by dwarves; and Sapin, the bustling human kingdom brimming with activity. Although monarchy exists here as it did previously, leadership is inherited rather than earned, a fact he concludes has severely limited technological growth. Magic, abundant and accessible, seems to have rendered innovation less necessary. Intrigued, the king dives deeper. In his old life, warriors cultivated ki, an internal life force harnessed through arduous training to strengthen bodies and weaponry. Here, a similar energy called mana saturates not just people, but the very air around them. Control of mana is rare and largely genetic. Only 1 in 100 children can master it. The king discovers two prevalent forms of mana manipulation: augmenting, which imbues the body with incredible strength, agility, and defense but suffers limited reach; and conjuring, which projects mana externally to shape the environment. However, conjurers must supplement their internal mana cores by drawing mana from their surroundings. Interestingly, Alice herself belongs to a rare subclass of mages known as deviants, specifically an emitter, possessing a unique aptitude for restorative magic. Books reveal that a mage experiences their first awakening between early adolescence and late teenage years, when their mana core first manifests. The king immediately notices striking parallels to his previous life's ki center. In his former world, children learn to meditate, sensing scattered ki fragments inside their bodies and merging them into a central focal point. Driven by curiosity, the little king attempts this meditation himself, and astoundingly succeeds on his first try. Unfortunately, before he can explore further, Alice interrupts his breakthrough, unknowingly delaying his potential discoveries. 2 years fly by, yet Alice still feels she's barely begun understanding her intriguing son, whom she's lovingly named Arthur. Observing him piece by piece has become her favorite pastime. She watches with mild irritation as Reynolds enthusiastically teaches Arthur sword techniques using nothing but a stick. Utterly absurd, considering their boy can barely toddle across the floor. Still, she treasures such moments, diligently documenting them in her daily diary, always smiling fondly at these memories. Noticing Arthur's keen fascination with Central Ashbur's bustling merchant district, Alice begins frequenting the lively market more often. She convinces herself it's purely educational, definitely not spoiling her son. Plus, she rationalizes, fresh groceries daily are a pleasant bonus. As Arthur grows, Alice often wonders about his future, imagining he'll likely follow in Reynolds' adventurous footsteps. But maternal worry creeps in, hoping he'll fare better than naive youths blindly chasing dreams of fame as adventurers. One thing remains frustratingly consistent: Arthur's relentless habit of sneaking into the study, tempting Alice to relocate his crib there permanently, a decision she continually postpones. One afternoon, as Arthur curiously peers through the window, he notices Reynolds outside, eyes squeezed shut in intense concentration. Arthur's excitement spikes, eager to witness his father's magical display. But when Reynolds' efforts result in merely levitating a few pebbles inches off the ground, Arthur's anticipation crashes spectacularly. He stifles an internal groan, realizing his father spent 3 full minutes focusing just to accomplish something physically easier by hand. Alice joins Arthur moments later, gazing outside with mild annoyance at the mess Reynolds has created yet again in their front yard. Watching his father practice makes Arthur keenly aware Reynolds is an augmenter, raising curiosity about his own eventual awakening. What kind of mage would he become? Deciding he's seen enough, Arthur clumsily attempts to climb off the bench, eyes drooping from intense concentration. Mistaking his tiredness for drowsiness, Alice swiftly scoops him into her arms, declaring it nap time. Arthur urgently claps his tiny hands, innocently pleading to continue studying instead. Unable to resist his charm, Alice caves in instantly. Arthur settles comfortably before a book nearly his own size, eagerly flipping through pages, when a sudden crash echoes from outside. Panicking, Alice rushes to investigate, suspecting Reynolds' clumsiness again. Her absence provides Arthur with a perfect opportunity he's been waiting for, advancing his mana core formation. Indeed, Arthur's greatest accomplishment these past 2 years isn't merely knowledge accumulation. It's painstakingly gathering tens of thousands of microscopic mana fragments within his body, carefully guiding each fragment to congregate around his solar plexus, a delicate, arduous task marking his first true steps toward harnessing the immense power of this new world. Arthur now fully understood why it typically took until adolescence for a mana core to naturally manifest. The microscopic fragments crawled at an excruciatingly sluggish pace toward the body's center, taxing both the mind and body to their limits. Yet, our boy's relentless determination had brought him to the brink of completion. Just one fragment remained. As he painstakingly placed the final piece, a powerful explosion tore through the house, shattering walls and hurling debris everywhere in a fiery, deafening blast. Outside, Reynolds reacted instantly, shielding Alice with his body, his heart pounding wildly as scorching heat and sharp debris rained down around them. When the smoke cleared, they turned slowly horrified, to find their home utterly demolished. Alice felt a gut-wrenching wave of grief, and panic surged through her chest. Frantically, they sprinted toward the smoldering wreckage, hearts thundering, desperate to find their son alive. Reynolds feverishly cleared rubble aside, but his frantic worry soon shifted to stunned disbelief and then astonishment. There, calmly floating amidst the wreckage, was Arthur, completely unfazed, his tiny figure wrapped in a soft, glowing aura of mana as casually as if he just completed an easy level in a mobile game. Gently, Arthur descended onto the debris-covered ground, relishing the refreshing presence of mana now surging within his body. Colors seemed brighter, and even the trees around him appeared vividly green, as if enhanced by an Instagram filter. But reality abruptly snapped back into focus when he noticed the total devastation around him. Bewildered, he scanned the ruins, clueless as to what, or rather who caused such chaos. 5 years swiftly passed since that explosive incident. Alongside Alice's lessons in reading and writing, Arthur had steadily learned the basics of mana manipulation and physical augmentation. Initially, as he was still physically too small for any real sparring, his training involved simple fitness routines akin to beginner yoga classes his mother found online. Finally, his father determined it was time for Arthur to try wielding the wooden sword he'd enthusiastically gifted him for his 3rd birthday. Reynolds led him outside, casually holding a flimsy tree branch and spouting vague philosophical advice. Match your mana flow to your breathing. It's an organ, just like your heart or lungs. Arthur inwardly groaned, thinking these ambiguous instructions might sound profound on Twitter, but weren't particularly helpful to a literal 4-year-old. Still, he obliged, taking his stance and trading a few playful strikes with his dad. The sparring continued, Reynolds obviously enjoying every minute, while Arthur grew steadily more annoyed. Knowing his father wouldn't let him leave until he accomplished something meaningful, Arthur finally gathered his determination and swung his wooden sword, snapping his father's branch neatly in two. Victorious, Arthur promptly declared his wish to return to his beloved books, sounding exactly like someone eager to quit a tedious Zoom meeting. Back at his studies, Arthur learned more intriguing details about this world. Here, an individual's strength was gauged by the color of their mana core. Cores began black, tainted by bodily impurities, gradually progressing through red, orange, yellow, silver, and ultimately pristine white, each color subdivided into dark, solid, and light shades. Lighter shades indicated greater purity and power, like tears in a video game. Deeply immersed in meditation, Arthur's concentration shattered as Alice called him for dinner, yet another irritating disruption in his quest for knowledge. During the meal, Reynolds brought up the idea of finding Arthur a proper mentor to further hone his potential. Alice immediately protested, pointing out Arthur's tender age. Just 4 years old was far too young. Reynolds, however, persisted, confidently arguing their son's remarkable talent in mana manipulation shouldn't be wasted. Arthur mentally checked out from their exhausting debate, much like someone stuck listening to two podcasters endlessly arguing over trivial details. Suddenly, both parents turned to him, expecting an opinion. Feeling genuinely uncomfortable with adults deferring important decisions to someone whose biggest recent accomplishment was breaking a stick, Arthur played along, meekly asking, "Can you guys just come with me?" A stunned silence filled the air. Then laughter erupted. Somehow, his gullible parents hadn't even considered accompanying their child. Decision finalized, Reynolds proudly declared that they would journey together as a family to the bustling city of Zyrus. At last, departure day arrived. Accompanying their family was a team of seasoned adventurers, lending the scene a vibe straight out of a fantasy RPG squad assembling for a quest. Reynolds cheerfully introduced Arthur to Crunch, a spear-wielding augmenter who instantly took a liking to Arthur's polite demeanor. There was Angela Rose, an alluring conjurer specializing in wind magic, who clearly stood out for reasons that had little to do with magical prowess. Duran Walker, another conjurer skilled in earth magic, waved casually. Jasmine Flamesworth quietly prepared the carriages for travel, while Helen Shard, an augmenter specializing in magic-infused archery, completed the eclectic group. With everyone acquainted, they loaded the carriage and embarked on their journey, leaving Arthur excited yet uncertain about exploring the world beyond their sleepy little village. As their caravan ventured deeper into uncharted woods, dawn broke dramatically, and naturally, trouble followed. Monsters ambushed the party, but the adventurers swiftly handled the threat, dispatching creatures with practiced ease. Afterward, they made camp beneath the sprawling branches of ancient trees, gathered around a crackling fire. Arthur, sitting apart from the group, felt the monotony of travel weighing on him, his expression akin to someone stuck on an endless road trip without Wi-Fi. Helen, noticing Arthur's mood, approached him curiously, intrigued after hearing Reynolds boast non-stop about his son's prodigious magical talent. Crunch, spotting their conversation, impulsively grabbed Arthur, lifting him from the ground. With a mischievous grin worthy of an impulsive TikTok prankster, he declared a spontaneous duel, eager to test the prodigy himself. Arthur, bewildered by the sudden challenge, flashed pleading eyes toward his father, desperate for intervention. Instead, Reynolds only grinned broadly, enthusiastically egging his 4-year-old son on, casually telling him, "Come on, Arthur, time to show Crunch who's boss." Feeling utterly hopeless, Arthur wondered how his father managed to be as useful in a crisis as an offline GPS resigned to his fate. Our boy steadied himself, channeling deep memories from his past life. He tightened his small hands around his wooden sword, sprang forward, and charged at Crunch with the confidence of someone attempting parkour after binge-watching YouTube tutorials. Crunch, smirking confidently, stayed poised, ready to sidestep Arthur's predictable attack, but shock slapped him across the face when Arthur vanished faster than someone hitting skip intro on Netflix. Before Crunch could react, Arthur reappeared behind him, balancing himself carefully as he channeled mana swiftly into his blade. Arthur swung decisively, but Crunch smoothly dodged and responded with a swift counterattack. Instinctively ducking beneath the strike, like someone narrowly avoiding spoilers, Arthur seized his opening and slammed hard into Crunch's ribs. Caught off guard, Crunch toppled backward, stunned that he'd just been floored by a kid smaller than his last Starbucks cup. Crunch quickly retaliated, aiming a swift leg sweep, but Arthur ducked beneath it once again, narrowly avoiding disaster. Arthur knew his beginner's luck wouldn't last, and sure enough, Crunch delivered another ruthless strike. This time, Arthur took the hit squarely, flying backward as if he just lost a match in Super Smash Bros. He crashed painfully onto the dirt, aching and winded. Duran Walker smacked Crunch lightly on the neck, muttering, "Seriously, dude? He's a kid, not a crash test dummy." But Crunch barely noticed, awestruck by the astonishing skill Arthur had demonstrated. Reynolds again insisted he taught Arthur nothing, while Crunch stared skeptically, wondering if Arthur had somehow unlocked premium combat tutorials. Alice rushed to Arthur's side, using healing magic while scolding him for clearly spending his precious study time learning fighting moves behind her back. Arthur sheepishly brushed it off, insisting he just casually picked up a few tricks watching his father, and of course from those handy DIY combat manuals he had lying around. Crunch, deeply intrigued, begged Arthur to demonstrate the flashy moves again, but the adventurers embarrassingly failed every attempt, flopping harder than TikTok dance trends attempted by dads. Days passed as the journey continued toward Zyrus City. During this time, Arthur's birthday came and went, bringing a shower of gifts, not only celebrating his age, but also his patient efforts teaching the adventurers his unique skills. Surprisingly, Jasmine Flamesworth, usually as expressive as a muted Zoom call, gifted Arthur something meaningful. Unlike Helen and Reynolds, who made decent yet steady progress, Jasmine astonished everyone by swiftly mastering Arthur's complicated F-step technique faster than an influencer learns a new hashtag. After enjoying downtime at a picturesque waterfall, complete with Instagram-worthy views, the party ventured forth, eventually reaching a barren, rocky wasteland dramatically different from the lush greenery they had enjoyed earlier. The group jokingly blamed Reynolds for being a human Wi-Fi signal for trouble, magnetically attracting danger wherever he went. Arthur tried to dive into his book, but concentration proved impossible with Jasmine staring at him relentlessly, like someone binge-watching their favorite Netflix series. Abruptly, their peaceful journey shattered as bandits emerged, launching a storm of arrows. Angela Rose's wind magic elegantly deflected the barrage, scattering arrows harmlessly. Instantly, the adventurers snapped into combat readiness, exuding fierce auras reminiscent of superheroes assembling for a climactic showdown. Helen swiftly knocked an arrow, though judging by the staggering number of bandits surging toward them, she realized one arrow would hardly scratch the surface of this problem. Surrounded completely, the group watched grimly as the bandits' leader, looking about as charming as a Reddit troll in real life, ordered his goons to spare only the women and child. He crudely announced that damaged goods didn't fetch premium prices, making Arthur realize grimly that cruelty and crime weren't unique to his former world. Determined, Arthur gripped his dagger tightly, ready to defend himself. Before he could move, however, Alice hugged him fiercely, whispering reassuringly, "Don't worry, I got you." Another volley of arrows soared toward them, only to be stopped by Duran Walker's hastily conjured stone barrier. Yet, despite their best efforts, arrows slipped past, aiming straight for Arthur and Alice. Thankfully, Angela Rose quickly intervened, deflecting projectiles effortlessly with a gust of wind magic. The bandit leader confidently strode down to confront them, deflecting Helen's precisely aimed arrows with disturbing ease. Reynolds, enraged and protective, dashed forward, effortlessly cutting down attackers like an expert gamer clearing easy-level mobs. One cunning bandit attempted an ambush from behind, but Helen's arrow landed flawlessly, dropping him instantly. Crunch entered the fray with ruthless efficiency, stabbing his attackers repeatedly like he was speedrunning a fight sequence. Jasmine Flamesworth fought ferociously, dual daggers slicing enemies with surgical precision. No mercy, no hesitation. Suddenly, a creepy bandit with a whip lashed out at Jasmine but missed terribly, slicing off his own comrade's leg in a grimly hilarious friendly fire moment. Undeterred, The bandit cracked the whip again, its speed alarmingly fast. Jasmine, however, matched the intensity, weaving through each attack with acrobatic grace worthy of Cirque du Soleil auditions. Yet, despite her agility, several brutal strikes grazed her, proving that even Jasmine wasn't invincible. The battle raged on, intense and merciless, proving yet again to Arthur that this world, though fantastical, could be just as brutal and unrelenting as the one he'd left behind. Meanwhile, Arthur anxiously observed Jasmine's fierce struggle against the whip-wielding bandit. Clearly disadvantaged by the whip's impressive reach, Jasmine dodged frantically, leaving Arthur desperately searching for any way to help her. Yet despite his eagerness, he knew his child-sized body likely wouldn't stand a chance against an adult augmenter. A sudden violent crash interrupted Arthur's thoughts as someone slammed brutally into their carriage. Horror surged through him when he realized it was Reynolds, badly wounded and clearly outmatched by the towering bandit leader. Panicked, Arthur shouted at Alice to heal his father, but she stood frozen in shock, tears streaming down her face, too overwhelmed to summon her magic. Through gritted teeth and forced optimism, Reynolds managed a reassuring smile, weakly whispering to Alice that his injuries weren't lethal, just a flesh wound, really. Turning to Arthur, Reynolds' voice steadied, urgent yet proud. He insisted he could handle the bandit leader, but not if he had to worry about their safety. "Arthur, take your mother and run back down the trail. Don't stop, no matter what," he commanded. Arthur stubbornly protested, declaring firmly, "I can fight too." Reynolds gently placed a hand on Arthur's head, acknowledging his son's bravery. "Your real job is protecting your mother, the baby she's carrying," Reynolds replied softly, his words weighted with urgency. Arthur nodded solemnly, promising on his life he'd keep them safe. Reynolds urged them again to hurry, warning that the enemy had 4 mages backing them up. Realizing their plan, the bandit leader barked harshly, ordering his men to capture Alice. Instantly, Arthur grabbed his mother's trembling hand, sprinting desperately away. A bandit lunged forward, aiming to stop their escape, but Crunch heroically intercepted, tackling him head-on and giving Arthur a chance to flee. An arrow whistled menacingly toward Arthur, but instinctively sensing it, Arthur swung his wooden sword upward, blocking the projectile just barely, though the arrow shattered his blade. The archer, momentarily stupefied by a toddler deflecting his best shot, met his swift end when Helen's arrow struck him right between the eyes. "Get moving!" Helen shouted fiercely, urgency clear in her voice. As Arthur ran, something troubled him deeply. He recalled Reynolds mentioning 4 enemy mages, but he'd counted just 3 fighting. Crunch battled 1, Duran Walker another, and Jasmine a third. Then it hit him, his stomach twisting with dread, as he spotted the elusive 4th mage perched atop a hill, conjuring a colossal sphere of mana aimed straight at him and Alice. Without time to think, Arthur slammed his tiny feet into the ground, shoving Alice to safety. He threw his dagger with pinpoint accuracy, embedding it deep in the mage's leg, but not before the enormous mana blast crashed brutally into Arthur, flinging him violently toward the cliff's edge. Using a desperate burst of mana, he tugged the mage along with him via the dagger tethered by a mana string. As they plunged downward, the mage frantically grabbed at the cliffside, only for the brittle earth to crumble, sending both tumbling into the abyss. Duran Walker, witnessing Arthur's devastating fall, frantically conjured a massive stone hand, desperately trying to catch him, but was already too late. Tears blurred Arthur's vision, not from the terror of falling, but from the heartbreaking realization that his dream of being an older brother was slipping away, vanishing into the darkness with him. Suddenly, the scene shifted, transporting Arthur, now King Gray, into a familiar chamber, warmly lit yet heavy with somber quiet. Marlor, an elderly councilman, greeted him respectfully yet curiously, confessing bittersweet envy toward the fleeting glory kings received after each victory. "To what do I owe the surprise visit, Your Majesty?" Marlor inquired gently. Without a word, Gray quietly placed a gleaming warm medal upon a polished table, its brilliance overshadowed by his weary expression. As he turned to leave, Gray announced with a faint smile, "I'm retiring. In a world burdened by dwindling resources and declining birth rates, wars have become structured duels between kings rather than clashes of armies. Gray, celebrated and mighty, had been one of those kings. Yet his decision wasn't rooted in exhaustion or inadequacy. The true source of his resignation was emptiness, a void left by the absence of cherished loved ones. An orphan, Gray had nothing left to fight for, nothing left to protect. Now reborn as Arthur, the yearning for connection burned brighter than ever. He would trade everything, even his newfound life, just for one more chance to return to Ashbur and embrace his family again. Arthur's eyes fluttered open to a sky so expansive he briefly wondered if he'd woken in another world again. His body ached terribly, and as he turned his head slightly, nausea twisted his stomach at the gruesome sight of the mage's broken, lifeless corpse. He gagged, turning away swiftly. A single leaf fluttered down gently onto his face, jolting him awake. Nearby, he noticed a pouch of water and a bag of food, merciful salvation after this nightmare. Mustering the last reserves of strength, Arthur dragged himself painfully across the rough terrain, grasping the food eagerly and gulping down water like a man lost in a desert. Satiated yet utterly drained, he collapsed again, breathless. Eventually, Arthur's eyes opened once more. Determinedly, he tried to stand, his legs trembling violently beneath him. Falling back onto the ground, frustration surged through him. Gathering every ounce of grit left, he pushed himself upright again. Limping toward the mage's corpse, he grimly retrieved his dagger, its blade slick with blood. Looking up, he finally registered the dizzying height from which he'd fallen, an impossible survival. Yet he had no time to dwell on such miracles. He began staggering forward, loneliness settling heavily over him. Then, an eerie voice whispered out from nowhere, startling Arthur into alertness. His first irrational thought was that the dead mage was somehow haunting him. The voice echoed again, gentle yet unnerving, asking simply, "How's your body feeling?" Arthur froze, dread pooling in his stomach, unsure whether he was losing his mind or if something even stranger awaited him in the shadows ahead. Nervously gathering his courage, Arthur tentatively poked at the mage's corpse to verify its state of deadness, like a kid nudging roadkill with a stick. Immediately, the voice chimed in reassuringly, "Relax, kid. He's not going full zombie apocalypse mode on you." Arthur exhaled, relieved at the voice's oddly casual reassurance. Still wary, though, his guard shot back up. Narrowing his eyes skeptically, he questioned, "Are you the one who saved me from turning into a pancake back there?" Without hesitation, the voice confirmed, "Guilty as charged." But when Arthur pressed for a name, she cryptically replied, "All in good time." Arthur wasn't having it. Crossing his tiny arms defiantly, he retorted, "Yeah, I've heard enough shady explanations from online scammers. I'm not buying any of this." The voice calmly chuckled, clearly amused. "Fine, skeptical one. But just remember, I'm your only ticket home." Mention of home tugged sharply at Arthur's heart, flooding his mind with images of his parents and the unborn sibling. Anxiety bubbled within him. Were they safe? Did they reach Zyrus City? Suddenly humbled, he addressed her cautiously. "Mr. Voice, could you please point me the right way out of here?" Amused yet mildly irritated, she remarked, "Bold assumption, kiddo. I'm a lady." Still, appreciating Arthur's newfound politeness, she decided to help. Instantly, Arthur's mind expanded, the sensation like suddenly upgrading to high-speed internet. He could perceive distant landscapes, paths, and trees clearly. With newfound clarity, Arthur navigated confidently through the dense forest, his body recovering steadily, reducing pain to mere background noise by afternoon. His mind, however, brimmed with questions. How had she saved him from that fall? Why only him? Arthur's thoughts halted abruptly when he heard the sweet, welcoming rush of flowing water nearby. Without hesitation, he scrambled up a giant rock and dove straight into the refreshing river like someone cannonballing into a hotel pool on vacation. But the mysterious lady immediately teased, "Aren't you carefree? Though, ahem, that's quite a disappointing little weapon you're packing." Mortified, Arthur rushed to cover himself quickly, ears burning with embarrassment. After regaining his composure, he filled his water pouch, ate hastily, and mentally plotted his next steps. Given the cliff he fell from lay eastward, he reasoned he must be near the elves' domain, though strangely, the characteristic fog of Elshire Forest was absent. The absence of fierce mana beasts surprised him, given the area's abundant mana. Normally he'd seize the opportunity to absorb such rich energy, but there was no time to linger. He had a family to return to, a mother whose pregnancy could be at risk if they believed him dead. Eventually, Arthur reached the area where the mysterious lady resided. Mistaking her for an odd rock formation at first, he sighed in relief, only for her irritated voice to chide, "I'm not some glorified boulder genius. Follow the crevice if you actually want to see me." Swallowing his nerves, Arthur cautiously stepped into the glowing tunnel. The walls shimmered faintly with arcane energy, eerily beautiful yet intimidating. Suddenly, his foot slipped, sending him tumbling downward into an abyss shimmering with vivid, magical blue hues. He crashed hard, feeling a jaw-rattling pain surge through his entire body. Struggling to stand, Arthur glanced upward, only to collapse again in terror at the sight of the colossal monster towering before him. His heart raced wildly, panic overtaking reason. "Close your mouth, kid," the creature said dryly. "You look like you're auditioning for a dentist." As she extended a massive hand, Arthur recoiled, trembling. Calmly, she explained, "Relax. I'll need time to open a dimensional rift strong enough to get you home. Until then, the fruits here are safe, and frankly, you look like you could use some calories." Arthur bowed politely, gratitude outweighing fear. Approaching the mysterious glowing fruits, he caught a glimpse of his miserable reflection in their shiny surfaces, sadness rising as memories of family meals flooded his mind. Lost in nostalgia, he startled violently when the lady suddenly appeared behind him, inadvertently crushing the fruit and splattering juice embarrassingly over his face. Later, as they sat munching quietly, Arthur finally broached the subject of her identity. The imposing creature introduced herself as Sylvia. Gradually, his fear of her intimidating presence faded. Gathering courage, he bombarded her with questions that had been gnawing at his mind since the fall. "What is this place? Why are you alone here? Where did you come from? How'd you get hurt? And why save me?" Sylvia patiently explained this hidden zone lay between the Beast Glades and Elshire Forest, unknown and unvisited due to her protective wards. Arthur, it seemed, was her first visitor ever. Feeling at ease, Arthur softly offered, "You can call me Art, that's what my family calls me." Acknowledging this with a gentle nod, Sylvia continued, her tone softer, revealing loneliness beneath her formidable exterior. "I'm here alone because I have no one left. Powerful foes desire something I possess, and our last battle wounded me severely. As for saving you, maybe it was your bravery, your selflessness, or perhaps I simply needed someone to talk to. Honestly, even I'm not completely sure why." She sighed, standing slowly. "I must excuse myself. My wound is festering. Tomorrow, we'll tackle the dimensional rift." Arthur expressed sincere thanks, softly wishing her good night. Watching Sylvia's armored figure retreat solemnly into shadows, he couldn't help feeling sorrow at her palpable loneliness. Before vanishing completely, Sylvia gently added, "One more thing, I can't pinpoint your family's exact location, but I can promise you they're safe." Relief washed over Arthur, his weary heart buoyed by her comforting words. Arthur was momentarily speechless at Sylvia's comforting revelation. Relief washed over him, tears spilling from his eyes as a warm, genuine smile broke across his face. "Thank you," he whispered, overcome by emotion, finally receiving the good news he desperately needed. As time passed, Sylvia and Arthur filled their days with endless conversations whenever Sylvia wasn't occupied with the exhausting task of preparing the dimensional rift. Hours bled seamlessly into days, days into weeks, until Arthur couldn't remember life before their constant companionship. Although Sylvia remained secretive about her past, Arthur gradually began to piece together the truth about the mysterious armor-clad figure he'd initially feared. Living alongside Sylvia quickly taught Arthur the truth behind the cliché, never judge a book by its cover. Despite her intimidating, nightmare-inducing appearance, Sylvia proved herself to be kind-hearted, patient, and tender, qualities Arthur had grown familiar with through his mother. Sylvia, like Alice, knew precisely when to be gentle and when to reprimand him sternly for his mistakes. Thinking of stern reminders, Arthur recalled a particularly humbling moment. Once consumed by rage over the bandits who had shattered his peaceful life, he bitterly voiced his thirst for vengeance against their leader. Immediately, Sylvia had poked him lightly on the forehead, though lightly, from Sylvia's perspective, meant launching Arthur several feet backward. Calmly, she'd explained that while the bandits undoubtedly deserved punishment, it was, after all, why she refused to save the mage who fell alongside him. Allowing hatred and revenge to fester inside would only poison his own heart. Your path will undoubtedly have misfortunes, she'd advised, but letting rage cloud your judgment is like swallowing poison yourself. Move forward, live proudly, and wear your scars like medals. Then, and only then, will you achieve true victory. Arthur hadn't anticipated receiving a moral lesson from someone who initially resembled the villain in every horror story. Yet Sylvia's wisdom had deeply resonated within him. Lost in introspection, Arthur hardly noticed when Sylvia gently reminded him to finish eating the fruit she provided. As Arthur ate, he noticed Sylvia's wound looking increasingly severe. She quickly dismissed his concern, assuring him casually, "It festers occasionally. No big deal." However, another thought had captured her curiosity. According to human standards, mages typically awaken their mana cores around 12 or 13. Yet Arthur had already formed his core and demonstrated greater mana control than many trained adults. "Explain yourself, prodigy," she teased playfully. Arthur grinned confidently, puffing out his chest. "I'm just naturally gifted," he boasted, exaggerating for effect. In that case, Sylvia replied, amused by bravado, "Let me teach you something special, a meditation technique allowing mana absorption while moving, even during combat if you're skilled enough." Arthur's curiosity ignited instantly, his eyes wide with excitement. Sylvia demonstrated gracefully, moving fluidly and effortlessly absorbing mana simultaneously, like breathing air. Watching her perform, Arthur's fascination reached new heights. "Humans often have a limited understanding of mana," she explained patiently. "Mana beasts do this naturally from birth, but since humans awaken much later, their bodies aren't accustomed to this multitasking. You, however, are an exception. With enough practice, you'll master it." Encouraged by her words, Arthur eagerly committed himself to diligent practice while Sylvia worked tirelessly on the rift. Initially, his movements were awkward, leading to embarrassing trips and stumbles. Yet, undeterred, he persisted, absorbing mana while moving, gradually becoming second nature. Eventually, after tireless effort, he proudly mastered the challenging technique. Excited to share his accomplishment, Arthur turned eagerly towards Sylvia, only to find her collapsed, lifelessly sprawled on the ground. Panic surged through him as he realized the severity of her injuries. Blood seeped through her armor, pooling ominously. Desperate, Arthur grabbed Sylvia's enormous hand, mustering every ounce of strength to gently roll her onto her side. Her wound, once manageable, now gaped tragically. Glancing upward, he realized the dimensional rift she'd painstakingly created was finally complete. It suddenly struck him how oblivious he'd been, how Sylvia had silently endured worsening pain to build the portal, her suffering unnoticed by him until now. Devastation crushed Arthur's heart. He wept bitterly, clinging desperately to her, sobbing uncontrollably. "It's my fault. This happened because of me," he choked out miserably. Sylvia, voice weak yet gentle, comforted him softly. "Don't blame yourself. Thanks to you, my time in this forsaken cave ends sooner. That alone is worth any sacrifice." Tears fell relentlessly from Arthur's eyes, mourning her impending loss like the child he appeared to be. Gently, Sylvia urged him, "Our time is short. Don't waste it blaming yourself." Slowly, Sylvia's body began disintegrating into ethereal ash, her black armor dissolving to reveal magnificent, radiant white wings unfolding majestically. Arthur's eyes widened in stunned disbelief. Sylvia was a dragon, resplendent and awe-inspiring in her true form. Smiling softly, Sylvia admitted, "Yes, little one, I'm what your kind would call a dragon. But let's skip trivialities. With my veil gone, my enemies will find me soon. Before we part, there are things you must receive." Carefully, she presented him with a dazzling rainbow-hued egg alongside several shimmering feathers. "Warm this egg with my feathers. They'll conceal its aura." Arthur nodded tearfully, solemnly accepting her final gifts, the precious weight of them settling heavily in his arms. Before Arthur could even process what was happening, Sylvia suddenly bumped into him. At that exact moment, a strange reaction triggered. His clothes tore, an intricate glowing pattern spread across his skin like a digital tattoo come to life. Sylvia gave him a reassuring smile. You'll understand everything soon enough. Having done what she needed, Sylvia turned to open the portal. Time was tight. She couldn't craft a perfect gateway straight to his home, but this would get him close enough to human territory. Now hurry, jump in, she urged. Just as Arthur prepared to leap, a thunderous crash shook the cavern. Rocks plummeted from the ceiling, threatening to crush him. In a blur of feathers and power, Sylvia spread her massive wings, shielding him just in time. From the shadows emerged a sinister figure, a chilling doppelganger of Sylvia herself. Dressed in armor that seemed forged from nightmare fuel, the impostor addressed her formally. Hand over your stubbornness, and I may consider healing your wounds. Even Arthur could tell. This creepy clone looked alarmingly like Sylvia's true dragon form. Then, with a whisper of power, Sylvia froze time itself. Only she and Arthur could move. Her eyes glinted with a rare softness as she admitted she deliberately prolonged the portal's opening, just to steal a few more moments with him. I know it was selfish, she said, but I have one last request. Arthur blinked in disbelief. What kind of request? She smiled, voice breaking slightly. Call me Grandma. Just once. Arthur stared at her, utterly baffled. Time suspended around them, and despite his confusion, he whispered, Okay. Grandma. Tears streamed down Sylvia's face, warmth flooding her expression. Thank you, she murmured. With a bittersweet farewell, Sylvia pushed Arthur into the portal. As he tumbled through the swirling rift, he shouted one last time, Goodbye, Grandma. A gentle smile lit her face before the portal snapped shut. Arthur landed hard in a dense forest, towering trees casting mottled shadows around him. His mind was a whirlpool of pain, sadness, and frustration. The ache in his chest wasn't just physical. It was the weight of knowing he might never see Sylvia again. He screamed, raw and broken, the sound lost among the whispering leaves. No surprise, he was devastated. For 4 months, Sylvia had been a constant in his life, filling his head with memories that refused to fade. She'd been like family, his guide, his protector, his anchor. The love and care she'd given him had patched the holes left by this strange world. But this wasn't the end. As he lay there, a soft voice reached him, not live, but recorded, embedded deep within his mind like a secret playlist set to autoplay. Sylvia's voice echoed gently. You're nowhere near ready for the full truth. Your body is still that of a 4-year-old boy, even though your mana core has progressed to the dark red stage. I have infused within you a parting gift, a unique willpower that will shape your future as a mage. How you wield it will decide your path. Arthur felt no gratitude, only a storm of bitterness swirling inside him, a cocktail of sorrow, anger, and guilt. Sylvia continued, sensing his turmoil. I know how heavy this all feels. But remember, you still have a family waiting, a purpose to fulfill. Embrace the joys and innocence of childhood. One day, you will become a man your parents and I can be proud of. Her voice softened, promising, when your mana core surpasses the white stage, you will hear from me again. Then, I will tell you everything. The mention of King Grey, his past life's title, struck Arthur like a lightning bolt. He froze, mind clouded with confusion and suspicion. How long had she known? How did she know him? But for now, Arthur shoved those questions aside and faced the urgent present. If he spent this life chasing revenge alone, it would be no different from the last. So, with grim determination, he resolved to move forward. First, though, he wondered, where exactly was he? Activating the mana absorption technique Sylvia had taught him, Arthur dashed through the forest with godlike speed. Despite the mana coursing through him, his vision remained somewhat blurred, as if his internal GPS hadn't quite calibrated. But one thing was clear, he was deep inside Ellenhire Forest. Though he barely mastered mana rotation, he could now sustain magic far longer than before. Hours slipped by as he navigated the dense trees, yet no humans appeared. Sylvia had promised he'd find others soon, but all Arthur saw was endless green. After hopping from branch to branch like a monkey with newfound skills, Arthur finally caught a scent, a human presence. Carefully descending, he spotted a carriage below. Using his acrobatics, he crept closer, eavesdropping from a safe distance. The people gathered were far from friendly. They'd captured a young elf woman, her purity making her a prized commodity. The slavers whispered greedily about the fortune she'd fetch. Arthur's jaw tightened, his gaze darkening like a loading bar stuck at 99%. These bastards wouldn't leave this forest alive, not if he had anything to say about it. He knew those forest hounds the slavers wielded were the key to escaping this place. Securing one would be his ticket out. As for the slave traders themselves, they were about to become his personal punching bags, prime stress relief after months of turmoil. But Arthur wasn't reckless. Attacking all four at once would be a one-way ticket to game over. So he slipped into the shadows, patiently waiting for the perfect moment. As night draped the forest in shadows, Arthur steeled himself for the moment he'd been waiting for. Gathering every ounce of strength, he readied to strike when the guards would least expect it. His plan was simple, but daring. Create a distraction. He lobbed a nut into a nearby tree, the sharp crack instantly jolting the forest hounds into alert. Their snarls and low growls echoed ominously through the underbrush. One of the bandits hissed at his companion, "Shut those damn dogs up before they bring every monster in the forest down on us." While the man struggled to quiet the hounds, Arthur seized the opportunity. In the blink of an eye, he materialized before his target, a burly goon, and with a swift, mana-infused slash of his hand, he sliced clean through the man's throat. The strike was so precise it seemed choreographed, like a scene from a classic samurai film. Arthur wasted no time rifling through the corpse, his fingers closing around a sturdy dagger that looked far better than his battered wooden practice sword. Meanwhile, the other bulky bandit, growing impatient with the prolonged silence and the sudden quiet of the dogs, decided to investigate. Before he could react, Arthur was on him too. Another clean strike, another throat slit, and another enemy dropped to the cold forest floor. With two enemies dispatched, Arthur's small body was already feeling the strain. The adrenaline pumping through him was waning fast. Suddenly, the elf girl in the carriage stirred, her soft cries piercing the night, the last thing Arthur wanted. The remaining two goons emerged cautiously, stepping out of their shadows to search for their missing comrades. Arthur pressed himself tight against the carriage's side, heart hammering. But one bandit's keen instinct sensed movement. Without warning, he lunged. Arthur barely managed to block the strike, then retaliated with brutal efficiency, his dagger cleaving through the man's legs. A piercing scream shattered the quiet, rippling through the trees. The wounded bandit's cries drew his companion, running from the opposite direction. The bald leader arrived just in time to see his friend writhing in agony. "Be careful," he warned, voice rough as gravel. "This brat's a mage." The mention of a mage piqued the curiosity of the long-haired bandit, who discarded his sword with a smirk. Clearly, he planned to capture this golden goose without damaging him, thinking the kid might fetch a higher price than the elf girl. Charging forward with ruthless intent, the bandit caught Arthur's attention. Like a practiced acrobat, Arthur leapt aside and hurled a rock at the man's face. The impact left the bandit bleeding, dazed and snarling. Arthur seized the moment, throwing a mana-charged dagger that zipped through the air. But the bandit caught it mid-flight, a spark of respect or perhaps intrigue in his eyes. "Not bad, kid. You got some tricks," he sneered. Then came the brutal kick. The bandit slammed into Arthur with enough force to rattle even his stubborn frame, sending him crashing onto the dirt. For a moment, Arthur was winded, vulnerable, and almost defeated. But he wasn't done. The bandit grabbed him, lifting him off the ground like a rag doll. Arthur's fingers wrapped desperately around the man's wrist, condensing mana into his palm. Suddenly, an explosion erupted, so intense it seared the bandit's hand, rendering it useless. The scream of agony echoed through the woods. This was Arthur's chance. Without hesitation, he threw his dagger, slicing the bandit's throat with cold finality. Only the bald leader remained, writhing helplessly on the ground, his severed legs leaving him unable to move. Mercy was a concept Arthur abandoned long ago when it came to scum like these. With grim resolve, he finished the job. None of them would leave the forest alive. Turning to the trembling elf girl, her wide eyes betrayed fear and confusion. Gently, Arthur spoke soothing words, each carefully chosen to wash away her terror. When she finally calmed, He removed the cloth, gagging her mouth. Free at last, the girl clung to him with pleading eyes as if he were her only anchor in the wilderness. Arthur tried to reason with her. Those bandits won't come after you anymore. And the forest. Elves like you are usually safe here. She shook her head vehemently. Adults can fend off beasts, but children? They're prey for hounds and those cursed golem trees. The thought of babysitting a frightened elf didn't thrill Arthur, but he had little choice. Reluctantly, he asked, "How far is your home?" She shrugged, nonchalant. "I don't know." Arthur sighed, masking his frustration. "All right, I'm going to gather supplies. We'll be fine." Neither knew how long the journey would take, and the wrecked carriage was useless as transport. It would only draw unwanted attention. Still, Arthur looked forward to finding the elves' village. Maybe they had something to get him back to the human kingdom. While scavenging, Arthur found a cloak among the scattered belongings and offered it to the elf. "Here, it'll get cold out there." She smiled gratefully, and Arthur gave her a comforting pat on the head. As they set off, she introduced herself as Tesha Aelith, a girl lost and separated from her family in these wildwoods. Curiosity sparked, she asked if Arthur was from the human kingdom. "Whenever I think of humans," Tesha mused, "all I hear are rumors, like every man has 3 wives and is a total pervert." Their walk was filled with playful banter, teasing each other and sharing stories as the forest enveloped them. When night fell, they camped beneath a thick canopy. Arthur took watch while Tesha caught up on much-needed sleep. As Tesha settled into the tent, she offered, "You should rest too." Her grandmother had forbidden sharing beds with boys, but she promised to make an exception this time. Arthur, feigning tiredness, replied, "I'm not sleepy." She smiled knowingly. "Be careful out there. Beasts are more likely to attack if they see you alone." Though reluctant, Arthur agreed, knowing it was safer to share the tent. Eventually, they curled up together beneath the stars, the quiet forest alive with whispers, shadows, and the weight of their shared journey ahead. The next day dawned quietly. After their much-needed rest, Arthur and Tesha resumed their journey, moving steadily through unfamiliar terrain. Time passed unnoticed except for the subtle shift in scenery, an ever-changing canvas of trees and shadows. But inside Arthur, worry simmered beneath the surface. His thoughts often drifted homeward, to his parents and the baby growing inside his mother's belly. The impatience to return gnawed at him, clouding his mood like an unexpected software update that slowed everything down. Yet it wasn't just his mind that betrayed him. His mana core pulsed erratically, sending sharp, unpredictable waves of pain coursing through his chest. This cruel ache had become a daily visitor, striking him at the most inconvenient moments. Each morning, Arthur would wake, unsure if the day would be marred by that searing discomfort. One afternoon, the quiet tension of the forest was broken by the low growl of wild wolves tracking their scent. Arthur barely spared them a glance. Calm and focused, he drew a dagger from his belt and, with a practiced flick, sent it spinning into the bark of a tree mere inches from a wolf's snarling muzzle. The startled animals scattered, tails between their legs, their wild instincts overwhelmed by Arthur's sudden presence. Tesha, alert and sharp-eyed, pointed ahead toward a faint glimmer of hope. But as Arthur prepared to move, a sharp stab of pain struck again, folding him into the shelter of a tree. He stayed hidden, unwilling to let Tesha see him weakened. He didn't want her to worry. Night fell once more, thick and alive with the sounds of the forest. They made camp beneath towering oaks. The firelight flickers. Day after day passed in this rhythm: travel, pain, rest. Slowly, Tesha began to recognize the subtle markers of their route, small landmarks that gave their journey a semblance of progress. But the journey was slowing. Tesha's tiny frame faltered under the strain, and Arthur, seeing her fatigue, took her luggage without hesitation, unwilling to let her shoulders bear the full weight. He masked his own growing exhaustion, the persistent pangs from his mana core gnawing deeper, the mask of strength beginning to crack. One quiet afternoon, as they moved beneath the dappling canopy, Tesha broke their usual silence with an unexpected question. "Can I call you Art? Like your family does?" Arthur paused, caught off guard. Without hesitation, he smiled, genuine, easy smile, and nodded. Tesha's eyes widened in surprise at his willingness, and Arthur seized the moment, adopting a mock grandiose tone. "It would be my honor, Miss Aelith, to be addressed thus by the esteemed princess herself." Tesha rolled her eyes but couldn't suppress a laugh, pinching his cheek playfully. Their banter echoed softly through the trees, a rare lightness amidst the forest shadows. Suddenly, Tesha's gaze sharpened. She darted ahead toward a patch of moss-covered earth and ancient trees. Arthur wasn't as thrilled. He saw only more green, fog, and endless trunks, but he followed nonetheless. The forest stretched interminably. Truth be told, this was one of the longest journeys Arthur had endured since mastering Manhwa. But the slow pace served its purpose, drawing the pair closer despite the wide gulf of age and experience between them. Days blurred until, finally, Tesha paused, her hands tracing the bark of a towering tree. With a whisper of magic, she summoned a shimmering green gate that rippled open like a portal carved from the forest itself. Arthur stepped through, and instantly the world shifted beneath him. He landed on solid ground within a breathtaking elven city, gleaming with spires of ivory and crystalline waterways weaving through lush gardens. The grandeur was impossible to capture in words. Pristine felt like an insult to its majesty. Before he could catch his breath, several soldiers appeared, their armor gleaming under the sun. Their purpose was clear, not to apprehend the stranger, but to escort a figure of immense importance, the royal princess. Arthur's heart hammered as he locked eyes with Tesha, now standing with quiet grace among her people. His mind scrambled for an appropriate reaction, overwhelmed by questions and awe. Tesha gave him a subtle nod, a silent affirmation that this was all real. A knight approached, informing them the royal family had rushed to the city upon sensing the activation of the teleportation gate. Soon, a flurry of activity ensued as the queen, Mariel Aelith, and her husband, King Alduin Aelith, arrived with hurried steps and anxious expressions. Then, like a living legend stepping into the scene, came Viren Aelith, the former king known across the lands for leading the final great war against the humans of the Supon Kingdom. With his family reunited, Arthur gently nudged Tesha forward. Warm embraces followed, love radiating from every touch. The sight stirred something deep inside Arthur. He wondered, not for the first time, how his own parents might react upon seeing him again. King Alwyn turned to Arthur with a gaze both firm and kind. "Thank you not only as King of Elenoir, but as Tesha's father. You've done her a great service." His voice carried authority, but was tempered by genuine gratitude. "As a token of our appreciation," he continued, "we invite you to stay in the palace. Rest. Recover. And when you're ready, we're eager to hear your story." Arthur caught the unspoken command in those words. This was no mere invitation. It was an order. He bowed respectfully and expressed his thanks. But before he could respond further, Tesha grabbed his hand, pulling him forward with a determination that startled the courtiers. Tesha was eager to show him everything: the gardens, the libraries, the hidden alcoves only a princess would know. Arthur's first impression was awe. Though he expected a grand castle, the place surpassed all fantasy tropes he'd ever read about or seen in games. For a moment, he wondered if he'd stumbled into some overly dramatic fantasy novel. The queen personally introduced Arthur to the palace staff, ordering that he be treated with the utmost care. Though grateful for the hospitality, Arthur felt compelled to share the truth of his journey. Gathered before the royal family and senior knights, Arthur recounted his tale. He introduced himself as Arthur Lane, from a modest town in the kingdom of Sapin, honored to stand before them. His formal tone might have seemed rehearsed, but Arthur knew it was necessary. He couldn't be dismissed as a mere child. The king noted Arthur's maturity, a subtle twinkle in his eye betraying his growing curiosity. And so Arthur began, explaining vaguely how he had become separated from his family after encountering bandits. It wasn't a lie exactly, but certainly only part of the story. Inevitably, as the story reached the point where Arthur reunited with Tesha, the atmosphere thickened with tension. The king's composure faltered, his usually calm face hardening into a scowl upon hearing the terrible truth that slave traders, humans no less, his disdain for humans, already well known, deepened like a wound reopening, fueled now by the cruel reality that these few had stained the reputation of an entire race. Arthur, ever perceptive and unwilling to accept broad prejudice, met the king's icy gaze steadily. With all due respect, Your Majesty, he said firmly, slave trading is a profession, not a race. The room fell silent as those words hung in the air. A chorus of polished blades gleamed as knights instinctively drew their swords, their pointed weapons a stark response to what they took as insolence. The tension was palpable, thick enough to cut with a knife. Before the situation escalated, Varian Aelith stepped forward, voice deep and commanding, halting his knights with the force of his presence. His interest piqued. The former king leaned in, intrigued by the tale unfolding. "Tell me," he said with an almost amused tone, "how did you manage to free my granddaughter from those bandits? Did you parley or beg for their mercy?" Arthur shook his head, his expression steady and honest. "Neither. I'm a mage, though a child, yes, but that was enough. I eliminated the slave traders and rescued Tesha." An impatient knight, unwilling to accept what he considered blatant fabrications, drew his sword in a sudden, angry flash, ready to challenge Arthur's claim. Yet Varian's gaze cut through the brash knight like an ice blade, so cold, so sharp, it instantly quelled the challenge. The knight lowered his weapon, chastened. Arthur rose from his seat, meeting the room's watchful eyes with unwavering resolve. "Believe what you will," he declared, voice steady despite the weight in his chest. "Tesha is safe. That is the only truth I need to prove. My only wish is to return to my family in Sapin." The words seemed to land heavily. Tesha's eyes widened with shock, the reality of Arthur's impending departure stirring a flood of emotions. Her parents, too, exchanged glances filled with concern and disbelief. Arthur's voice softened as he addressed Tesha. "Our people share a complicated history. It wouldn't be right for me to linger here longer than necessary. My priority must be my family, and letting them know I'm alive." King Aldwin nodded solemnly before speaking. "We understand the past between humans and elves has left scars, deep and lasting. Yet you saved our daughter, traveled with her back to Elenoir. That deserves a reward worthy of your deeds." A shadow passed across his face as he continued, "But I must share difficult news. The teleportation gate to Sapin opens only once every 7 years, during the grand summit of our 3 races. It will be 5 years before the gate opens again." Arthur's heart sank at the news. Still, the king added, "We will dispatch a company of guards to escort you safely when the time comes. And for now, we ask you to stay. Let us offer you rest and hospitality as our honored guests." A pause lingered. Though some elves tolerate humans, many still harbor resentment from the wars long ago. Take your time to make yourself at home. Your escort will be ready by dawn. Later, Arthur entered a lavish chamber assigned to him. Everything about the room whispered comfort and luxury, a stark contrast to the hardships he had endured. He allowed himself a long, hot shower, welcoming the soothing wash. But even beneath the cascade, the pain from his mana core flared sharply, seizing his breath and forcing him to double over, clutching his chest. Exhausted, he collapsed onto a plush couch, clutching the egg Sylvia had entrusted to him like a talisman. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. Opening the door, he found Tesha standing there, her expression unreadable. Before Arthur could speak, she impulsively headbutted him in the stomach, catching him off guard and nearly making him gag. "I'm mad," she said simply, eyes bright with frustration. "You were cold with my parents, and now you're planning to leave so soon." Arthur massaged his belly, managing a tired grin. "I was only being respectful. They are royalty after all. You should be mad at me for not knowing sooner." Tesha's glare hardened. "I don't want you to go. You're the first friend I've ever had." That confession pulled something warm from Arthur's guarded heart. He draped an arm around her, a gesture of companionship forged in the fires of their shared trials. "Enough of that," he said softly. "Show me around the castle." Together, they explored the palace's sprawling gardens, wandering down winding paths bursting with spring blossoms and the gentle hum of life. Tesha's favorite spot was a secluded glade where flowers bloomed in vibrant colors and the air shimmered with magic. She showed Arthur the glow bees, tiny insects bred to emit a soft luminescent light, unique to Elenoir. As she pointed them out, Arthur suddenly noticed movement behind them. Instinctively, he grabbed Tesha and pushed her aside just in time to catch a dagger hurtling through the air. Reacting with astonishing speed, Arthur caught the blade mid-flight and flicked it back toward its thrower. The attacker stepped forward, revealing himself, none other than Virion Aelith himself. Arthur's shock was genuine. He wondered briefly if the princess's grandfather had just tried to assassinate her. But Virion's tone was calm, almost amused. "That was a toy," he said with a chuckle. Arthur couldn't help but feel a flush of embarrassment. Virion's eyes gleamed with respect as he observed Arthur's swift reflexes and mana control. "Your mana use may be rough, but your speed is impressive." Arthur wasn't sure whether to take that as insult or praise, so he said nothing. Tesha scolded her grandfather playfully, warning him to stop teasing Arthur. Virion just smiled, explaining that he found Arthur fascinating, a rarity after so many years. To test the boy, Virion tossed Arthur a wooden sword. Without hesitation, Arthur grasped it and swung with all his might, but the sword passed through what turned out to be a mana illusion. Undeterred, Arthur charged again, striking the decoy. But this left him exposed. Virion seized the moment, delivering a brutal elbow strike. Arthur dodged just in time, leaping out of harm's way. Though the blow stung, Arthur was far from defeated. He charged back, swinging fiercely. But Virion knocked him aside again. Tesha rushed to check on Arthur, concern shadowing her face. Virion, too, bore a faint scratch, a sign their duel was far from one-sided. When Virion called for another round, Tesha put her foot down and pinches her grandfather and said in a serious tone, "Enough. He's been through enough teasing for one day." The old man smiled quietly, a knowing glint in his eye. "If I had gone easy on you, Arthur," Virion Aelith said slowly, "I'd be at the mercy of someone decades my junior." Arthur felt a flicker of pride. It was an honor to see how much respect the former king held for him. But Virion's smile faded quickly, replaced by a serious, almost stern expression. "If you truly regard me as your honorable senior," Virion continued, his voice steady and commanding, "then I invite you to become my disciple." Arthur blinked, completely taken aback. The weight of such an unexpected offer pressed down on him like the first heavy snow of winter. Was the old man serious? Virion's steady nod confirmed it. "But I'm just a human," Arthur replied, uncertainty threading his words. "And I'm not sure humans are even allowed to stay in this kingdom." Virion waved the concern aside. "No one will dare cast you out while you are under my tutelage. I promise to teach you secrets and skills beyond what even the greatest mages in Sapin possess." The offer was tempting, almost irresistible, but Arthur's resolve didn't waver. He bowed politely. "Thank you, but I cannot waste time here. I need to reunite with my parents." The old man's eyes softened, understanding his determination. "Then I will make one more promise. You will be able to communicate with your family, so they know you are alive and well." Before the conversation deepened, Virion ordered the maids to escort Tesha for a bath and rest. Once alone, the elder's tone shifted as he addressed a more serious matter. "I know of your condition," he began quietly, "the searing pain where your mana core burns, how the attacks come more often. It's only natural to be curious how I know." Arthur's brow furrowed. "How?" Virion cut him off with a dismissive wave. "No use dwelling on that. The question you should ask is what lies behind the illness." He paused, gauging Arthur's reaction before continuing. "Have you heard of beast wills?" The phrase was foreign, yet it stirred a distant memory. The moment Sylvia had struck his mana, a sudden surge of power that seemed both blessing and curse. "I assume you've encountered a few mana beasts by now," Virion said, voice lowering with weight. "Beasts of Class A or higher carry within them a will, an essence they can pass on either to their offspring or to a chosen bond. How you came across such a powerful beast will, I do not ask. But at this stage, it is harming you more than helping." Arthur listened, the implications sinking in. If Virion knew so much, then he too must possess a beast will. Virion nodded knowingly. "I am a beast tamer, one who has mastered the monstrous will within himself." He looked at Arthur with a mix of sympathy and caution. "I understand your desperation to see your family, but be warned, your body is too young, too fragile for this power. If left unchecked, it will consume you from the inside out." Arthur lay back, sweat glistening on his brow. the weight of the warning pressing down like a physical burden. He drifted in and out of consciousness, haunted by visions of his fears and responsibilities, the monstrous embodiment of expectation that shadowed him even in sleep. But the source of his exhaustion wasn't ethereal. It was Tesha, perched on top of him, unknowingly pressing him deeper into fatigue. She was there to wake him, her energy uncontainable, eager to greet the new day. Yet Arthur, craving just a few more minutes of rest, whispered to the shadowy weight pressing down, summoning it back into the recesses of his mind. Later, as Arthur prepared for the day, Tesha's voice broke through his thoughts. "So it's true. I heard Grandpa says you'll stay a while." Arthur hesitated. His plans hinged on the journey with Virion, uncertain what the future held. As he approached the carriage waiting to take him to meet the old man's mysterious friend, the king and queen appeared, their faces etched with concern. "We urge you to reconsider," the king pleaded softly. "It's against our traditions for a human to remain in Elenoir for long." Virion stood firm, unwavering in his decision. "Arthur has captured my attention. He will stay a little longer. Besides, our daughter has grown fond of him." Despite the monarch's protests, Virion's voice was ironclad. "He will be under my direct care. The entire kingdom will know he is watched." Arthur cracked a small smile, reassured by Virion's protection. As the carriage rolled through the countryside, Arthur's thoughts wandered. How long would this trip take? What kind of friend awaited him? Suddenly, Tesha leaned over his shoulder, drifting into sleep. The excitement of waking early had finally caught up with her. As the sole princess of Elenoir, Tesha's life had been a lonely one. Deceived and hurt by false friends on all sides, she had built walls around herself to keep others at bay. Yet, in the brief time with Arthur, she'd shown more laughter and light than in years. Virion, watching quietly, felt a genuine gratitude for Arthur's influence on his granddaughter. Eventually, the carriage slowed and stopped before a lone house nestled deep in the wilds. Arthur's curiosity sharpened. Who was this mysterious friend that Virion had traveled so far to see? But the old man wasted no time. Kicking open the door with the force of a tempest, he called out for the witch inside. A woman emerged, her eyes flashing with annoyance and fierce pride. "This is Lilia Darren," Virion announced. "An old friend and a deviant of great skill." Arthur bowed deeply, manners unshaken by his exhaustion. Lilia welcomed them inside, and as they crossed the threshold, Arthur reflected on her magic. Like his mother's, it defied the 4 basic elemental categories. Though unsure how she might help, Arthur's curiosity burned quietly beneath the surface. Lilia's voice was calm but firm as she explained. "There is little anyone can hide from me when I choose to see." She smiled knowingly. "I already know you are special, so special that even I cannot see all of your story. But I know enough. You didn't come to me for my clairvoyance. You came because you want to see your family again." She instructed Arthur to lean forward and focus on the basin of water before him. As Arthur settled into the basin of water, the lady began her chant, her hands weaving through the air with practiced grace. Slowly, ripples spread across the water's surface, distorting and shimmering like a live tapestry. Through the swirling mist, vague shapes began to take form, familiar faces emerging from the depths. Arthur's breath caught. His parents. There they were, framed in the liquid mirror, a scene so ordinary yet so achingly precious. They sat across from each other, sharing a meal, the kind Arthur remembered from his childhood, warm and comforting. The clatter of spoons against bowls, the soft murmur of conversation, these simple moments now felt like fragile treasures. Then suddenly their heads snapped up. The sound of Arthur's voice calling out pierced the quiet room, an echo from another realm that froze them in place. Time itself seemed to halt as they stared, eyes wide with disbelief. "I'm your son," Arthur's voice echoed gently into their minds, bypassing all earthly barriers. It was enough to stop them in their tracks, their spoons slipping, hands trembling as the weight of the revelation settled in. For a long moment, silence enveloped them, an unspoken acknowledgement of hope and shock intertwined. Arthur pressed on, his voice steady despite the miles and magic between them. "I'm alive. I survived the fall off the cliff, just barely. Right now, I'm staying in the kingdom of Elenoir with elves. But please keep this between us." His mother's face tightened, sorrow mingling with relief. "Don't blame yourselves for what happened," Arthur assured them softly. "I'm proud of the choices I made. If I could go back, I'd make the same ones again." He hesitated, then explained, "The pain I experience, my illness, it's why I have to stay here longer to be treated before I can come home. I don't know if I'll get another chance to speak with you. Only one woman can help me keep this connection." Before their brief link ended, Arthur asked his father with quiet urgency, "Please keep Mother and the baby safe. I'll keep training, so don't be surprised if one day your proud son beats you in sparring." The moment the connection faded, Arthur's father collapsed into tears. His mother followed soon after, their sobs filling the room. The impossible had become real. Their son was alive. Far away, Arthur wiped a stray tear, overwhelmed by the conversation's weight. Gathering his resolve, he told the old man, "I'm ready. Whatever comes next, I'm ready." After their brief visit with Lilia, the group returned to the castle. The king and queen awaited them, their expressions a mix of anticipation and solemnity. As Elder Virion and Tesha stepped inside, the king blocked Arthur's path, not out of resentment or suspicion, but with a desire to reconcile. The queen's eyes shimmered with genuine regret. Neither held back as they voiced apologies for their earlier coldness, the heavy walls of pride finally crumbling. Arthur, ever gracious, extended his hand in friendship to the king. Their handshake was firm, sealing an unspoken truce. Tesha watched the exchange, uncertain. "If they're really sorry," she muttered under her breath, "they should let me take Arthur out to explore the city." Neither monarch opposed, and soon, Arthur and Tesha prepared for their first real adventure beyond the castle walls. Tesha's excitement was contagious as she led Arthur through the winding streets and hidden alcoves unique to Elenoir. She pointed out delicate architecture, whispering legends and cultural quirks, each step painting a vivid portrait of her homeland. But their stroll was interrupted when Arthur collided with an elf, intentionally, Arthur soon realized, whose smug expression radiated disdain. "You don't belong here," the elf sneered, finger jabbing accusatorily. "No matter what favor you've won from Elder Virion, you're still an outsider." Arthur's jaw tightened, irritation bubbling beneath his calm exterior. Before he could respond, Tesha stepped between them, her voice cool but firm. The elf introduced himself with an arrogant curl of his lip. Fareth Ifsar, a self-proclaimed great knight of Elenoir. When Tesha questioned his arrogance, he retorted with scorn, asking how she could stand to breathe the same air as a mere commoner like Arthur. Fareth, puffed up with pride, offered to escort Tesha himself, an attempt to assert dominance and control. Arthur's eyes sparkled with mischief as he fired back with playful banter, his carefully chosen words hitting Fareth like a verbal mic drop. Fareth's face twisted in rage, the insult to his knighthood unbearable. With a dramatic flair, he threw down a challenge, a duel against Arthur. The tension rippled through the crowd as Tesha stepped forward, outraged. "How dare you challenge the disciple of Elder Virion?" she demanded, voice ringing like a clarion call. Fareth sneered, doubling down. "I won't allow anyone to trample my pride. This is how I was raised, to defend my honor. Accept or flee with your tail between your legs." The stakes were clear. In Elven society, the outcome would reflect on Elder Virion himself. Arthur studied the faces around him, fascinated by the gravity dueling held here, something he had never fully grasped before. Fareth wasted no time. With Tesha reluctantly officiating, the duel began. Fareth charged, aiming for a quick, decisive blow. But Arthur balled his fist, channeling all his strength into a single, devastating punch. The impact was brutal. Fareth spat out blood and was sent sprawling several feet back. Arthur stood still, genuinely uncertain if this was all it took to win. Tesha, however, was unsurprised. "I told you," she said softly, "you're stronger than you think." As Arthur processed this new reality, Tesha took his hand and they hurried off, the city fading behind them as their journey pressed on. Though the day that followed lacked the drama of the duel, it brought a welcome reprieve. Arthur found comfort in the quiet moments with Tesha, their laughter and light-hearted teasing a balm to his troubled mind. One evening, as they sat beneath a starlit sky, Tesha's voice broke the silence. "Are you nervous about the training ahead?" Arthur's gaze lifted to the constellations, his expression resolute. The pressure's there, he admitted. Virion's warnings, he made it clear. The lessons won't be easy. The pain I'll face, he compared it to being submerged in boiling tar. He swallowed hard, the raw image settling heavy in his chest. I'll be far from home, surrounded by strangers. Even the smallest tasks will feel like climbing a mountain. But Virion promised the rewards will be worth it, if I can endure. He smiled at Tesha, determination shining in his eyes. I'm not nervous. I'm excited. Arthur ready to face the challenges looming on his horizon. Years passed in the blink of an eye. The next morning, a more mature Tesha was there to wake him, her teasing banter filling the room. Their bond had deepened, the gap between them bridged by shared experiences. Just as their playful argument grew heated, Elder Virion's voice called from the doorway, cutting through the tension. Time to get ready for your lessons, he said, stern but caring. Arthur sighed but rose, knowing the path ahead was as demanding as ever. Before we dive into the thick of things, Elder Virion laid down a quick primer. The world's elemental magic splits into 4 core forces: fire, water, earth, and wind. Beyond these, there exist higher, more complex elements like ice, gravity, lightning, and sound. Only mages who've truly mastered their base elements can manipulate these advanced forces. Such masters are called deviants. Among the races, dwarves are confined to earth and fire, but their connection to these elements runs deep. Their signature skill, crafting and bending metal like it's putty, and the elite among them can command fire and earth so fiercely they summon magma, essentially wielding the planet's molten heart. Elves can bend water, wind, and earth with uncanny finesse, far beyond what humans manage. Occasionally, an elf will spawn a rare deviant who commands plants, though none can handle the higher forms of water, wind, or earth. Humans, however, are unique. They can manipulate all 4 basic elements, and are the only race capable of producing deviants across every element. Plus, humans create anomalies, those rare exceptions like emitters and healers who defy elemental categories. Balancing power among the 3 races is no simple math. Population size, elemental affinity, and mage diversity all play their part. This, in a nutshell, is what Arthur has grasped so far. Glancing toward Virion, his master, he asks if this breakdown will make sense to his listeners. Virion pauses thoughtfully before giving an approving nod. Tesha steps in next. She respects that assimilation preps Arthur's body to bond with his beast will, but she argues for physical training too, the kind she endures, blending magic with muscle work. Arthur nods in agreement. Over the last 3 years, their racial contrasts have become impossible to ignore. Humans typically awaken powers in their early teens. Elves, however, tend to unlock theirs younger, around age 10. Tesha herself awakened at 9 and since has been sharpening her magic with a tutor while learning swordplay from her grandfather. The old man grins and teases. Mad, you're the only one getting pummeled in training? Tesha laughs, admitting it's brutal, but she's all in. Arthur watches silently, knowing she's shaping up to be a real powerhouse. Virion takes a moment to clarify. For Arthur, the past 3 years have been about fusing his bones, muscles, and organs with mana. Though he hasn't done physical training like Tesha, Virion assures them that when this fusion completes, Arthur's body will be as tough as any seasoned warrior. Turning back to Arthur, Virion notes that the mana fusion hasn't yet fully drained his reserves. So today, he plans to push Arthur further. No more half measures. After this, Arthur won't just be a lucky adventurer wielding a beast will as a tool. He'll be a bona fide beast tamer. Virion intends to ignite Arthur's mana core by transferring a surge of his own mana into him. It'll get warm, he warns, but nothing unbearable. As soon as the energy starts flowing, Arthur's lesson in understatement begins. It's searing agony, every fiber of his being burning. A blinding light erupts from his chest, swelling until it's nearly unbearable to look at. Then, with no warning, a shockwave crashes through the room, flinging Virion and Tesha to opposite walls. When the dust settles, Tesha and Virion rush to Arthur's side. He's dazed but whole. The display of raw power sparks Virion's burning curiosity. He presses Arthur about the origin of his beast will. Arthur answers with quiet conviction. It It was gifted by a female dragon. That revelation hits Virion like a bolt from the blue. His excitement and disbelief collide. He's been training a true dragon tamer all along. Later, Arthur wakes in bed, Virion nearby looking relieved. Arthur asks if his abilities will remain secret when he leaves. Virion promises confidentiality, but drops a bombshell. Arthur's departure is scheduled in just 4 months. Arthur reels. He expected at least 2 more years here. Virion explains an inter-kingdom youth tournament is coming. The portal in Zyrus City, inside the Sapien Kingdom, will soon open to connect Elenoir and Dar. Tesha isn't around because she'd lose her mind hearing Arthur's leaving so soon. Though Arthur eagerly anticipates seeing his family, 4 months feels like a blink. Virion reassures him the coming months will be brutal enough he'll beg for time to pass. Assimilation complete, his training is about to ramp up to a whole new level. As Virion steps away, Arthur's eyes catch an egg that slipped from the couch. Cracks spiderweb across its shell, attaching. Moments later, a tiny dragon emerges. The little creature yawns dramatically and promptly collapses, leaving Arthur puzzled. Later, Arthur gazes at the tiny dragon, clearly bonded. He's equally captivated. The cuteness is off the charts. Suddenly, the dragon bites him. It releases only because Arthur's salty, sweaty skin tastes foul. The bite stings sharply, leaving a lasting burn on his arm. The dragon calls him Mama telepathically. Arthur, surprised, corrects her. He's a boy and prefers Papa. He names her Sylvie after her mother. While playing, Arthur notices the burn mark isn't just a wound. It feels like a mystical tether between them. As he relaxes, sleep claims him. In the dead of night, Arthur wakes to find Tesha holding Sylvie tightly. The dragon is howling for mercy. Tesha's clearly smitten. Morning arrives. Arthur sees Tesha still obsessed with the little dragon, though Sylvie isn't quite as impressed. When they meet Virion, Tesha excitedly announces Arthur's new pet. Virion looks baffled, stunned by this unusual companion. At this point, he's convinced Arthur's journey will keep throwing curveballs. Finally, Arthur explains everything. Sylvie's origin, their bond, and what this all means. Virion leaned closer, his voice barely above a whisper, the kind that makes you lean in just a bit more. Sylvie's species rarely hatch without their kin nearby. Arthur frowned, the question tugging at him like a loose thread. So why now? Why did she decide to come out in front of me? Virion studied him, thoughtful. Because yesterday, you fully ignited her will. That's the spark she needed to break free. The room seemed to hold its breath. Arthur shifted, a flicker of doubt crossing his face. But does she really need to be hidden? Honestly, she looks like one of those annoying pet videos blowing up on TikTok, cute, but harmless. No one's going to realize how dangerous she is. Virion smiled, that knowing kind of smile like someone who's seen too much. You'd be surprised what people miss when they're scrolling past. But this isn't about social media clout. Your mana core stalled during assimilation. Now you're awake, and it's time to get serious. Training your core and Sylvie's will is non-negotiable. Arthur felt the weight settling in. What's next, then? He asked, bracing himself. Virion's eyes glinted. Think of your mana as XP in a game. You level up by fighting, constantly. Only then do you unlock the first stage of your beast will. And if you spar with other beast tamers who've already leveled up, that's like activating a cheat code for growth. Without warning, Virion summoned a shadow that slithered around him, shifting his silhouette. Arthur's eyes widened, captivated. Beast tamers link with their mana beasts, borrowing their strength. The first phase, acquire, grants brute force. But it's the integrate phase, took me decades, that lets you embody your beast's unique skills. His fingers flexed, shadows sharpening into claws. Now I'm a shadow panther, silent, deadly, impossible to catch. Arthur's pulse quickened. Watch carefully, Virion murmured, especially when I slip up behind you. A chill ran down Arthur's spine. It meant Virion could ambush him even when he knew it was coming. Suddenly, Virion vanished like a glitch in reality. A soft tap landed on Arthur's shoulder. He whipped around, empty air. Before his brain caught up, Virion reappeared behind him, smirking. Arthur froze, awe and unease swirling inside. Okay, I surrender. Viren's smile softened. Fair warning, the integrate phase drains me every time. Arthur shook his head, baffled. How can you be invisible right behind me? Viren chuckled. Shadow panthers don't just sneak, they manipulate wind and silent sound instantly. No one's sensors pick us up. Viren's grin faded. He drew his sword. Enough games. Time to get serious. Days blurred. Arthur threw himself into training, sweat mixing with resolve. Under Viren's watchful eye, he unlocked the first stage of his dragon will and learned to cloak his beast will's presence from other mages. When not pushing his mana core or delving into Sylvie's will, Arthur sparred relentlessly. Assimilation had forged a body ready for the grind. But amid the chaos, Arthur grasped moments of childhood bliss, like sneaking extra streaming time past midnight. Sylvie's wish for innocence was his anchor. Those stolen breaths became treasures as departure loomed. Finally, the day arrived. Tessia's bright eyes were clouded with sorrow. Years of shared mornings and late-night talks made this goodbye shatter her. Arthur's bag was packed. The burn Sylvie left was hidden beneath feathers she had gifted. The carriage gleamed, waiting. Viren handed Arthur a pendant etched with the ADH house crest, a beacon for navigating life's forests. Tessia nodded quietly, weighed down by grief. Arthur's fierce hug broke her defenses. Tears fell like a monsoon. Inside, Ferrith and armored knights awaited. Ferrith's eyes narrowed as he saw Arthur, memories flaring. Remember our duel? You played dirty. Arthur met his glare calmly, easing tension. Ferrith's cheeks flushed when a friend loudly called him F in front of a lowly human. Despite rocky beginnings, laughter bubbled up. The carriage rolled through a glowing portal. Zyrus pulsed like a city on espresso, alive, loud, layered with every dreamer and hustler. The carriage slowed before a grand mansion. Arthur's chest tightened before towering doors. Memories crashed, near death, loss, blood, brutal training, but none heavier than this. He swallowed, knocked. A maid smiled and opened the door. Behind her, a toddler's eyes shone wide. After what seemed endless, Alice appeared chasing Elenoir Lewin. Alice froze at Arthur's sight, dropping her bowl. Arthur's heart cracked realizing this girl was his sister. He smiled warmly, greeting her with all the warmth he could muster. Alice hugged him tight, tears streaming. The toddler sobbed, overwhelmed. Reynolds joined eagerly, arms wrapping around his family. Four stood united, raw and real. Even the maid wiped away tears. Once the initial bustle settled, Arthur found himself at the center of a lively barrage of questions. Everyone was eager to know the details of his journey. Meanwhile, little Ellie planted herself beside the group, her tiny face scrunched up in unmistakable irritation at being overlooked. Alice noticed immediately, and with a warm smile, called her over, gently coaxing her to greet her big brother. Ellie hesitated, still grasping what big brother truly meant. After a pause, she shuffled forward. Her mother softly reminded her, he's the same brother you hear about in your bedtime stories. Encouraged, Ellie offered the greeting reserved for heroes in a child's world. Arthur's face softened into a genuine smile, touched by her innocence. With calm restored, Arthur began recounting his story from the beginning. Though he trusted his family, he carefully left out the darker parts that might burden them. He spoke of surviving the terrifying cliff fall, luck and instinctive magic protecting him, then meeting Tessia, spending time in Elenoir and his recovery. His parents listened with steady eyes, absorbing each word. Reynolds, however, found his attention drawn elsewhere, to the small creature perched atop Arthur's head. His curiosity overcame him. "Who's this little one?" he asked softly. Arthur answered openly. "I found her in a monob den. Sylvie's mother was badly injured. I couldn't save her, but I took Sylvie in." Elisa's eyes filled with concern. "Are you really healed now? Especially after your illness?" Arthur smiled with quiet assurance. "I am. The illness was caused by my unstable manicore awakened too soon, but I'm stable now." Still, he held back the full truth, knowing some secrets were safer kept for now. Reynolds' eyes brightened with pride. "What stage is your manicore at?" Arthur returned the question. How about yours? Reynolds puffed up with pride. I broke through to the dark orange stage 2 years ago. Arthur hadn't expected his father's advancement and felt pride swell inside him. Reynolds wore his progress like a badge. Then, with a playful grin, Reynolds flipped the question back. Arthur hesitated. Light red. Reynolds was visibly shocked, breath-catching. That's... His voice trailed off. Ellie, quick to mimic, repeated, light red, with wide-eyed delight. Elise frowned, scolding Reynolds gently for swearing around their daughter. Eager to move on, Reynolds suggested a sparring match in the backyard. The routine brought a genuine smile to Arthur. He finally felt like he was home. Suddenly, the mansion doors burst open. A family of 3 stepped inside, the caretakers of Arthur's family during his absence. Reynolds introduced Vincent, longtime friend and owner of the Helstia auction house, a family estate. Arthur bowed politely, summoning all his manners to greet Vincent, Elise, and their daughter, Lilia. While Reynolds chatted, Vincent and Elise exchanged looks, clearly noting the contrast between Arthur and his father. Vincent even voiced doubt over their blood relation. Elise wasted no time introducing Lilia. Arthur and Sylvie greeted her warmly, though Lilia's heart belonged to the little dragon perched on Arthur's shoulder. Pleasantries concluded, Reynolds proposed the duel. Outside, father and son stretched, preparing. Elise insisted Vincent sit out, and he complied reluctantly, his surprise evident. To hear that an 8-year-old had awakened and reached 3 stages, when even prodigies at Zyrus Academy barely touched the dark red stage at 11 or 12, was remarkable. Noticing Vincent's skepticism, Arthur felt relief he hadn't revealed much about his power. Light red was just the beginning. With training and Sylvie's help, he knew he'd rise far beyond. Reynolds ignited his inner fire, literally and figuratively, the skill honed after reaching the dark orange stage. Arthur matched his father's readiness, and the spar began. Arthur struck first, throwing a precise punch. Reynolds blocked with bare hands, expression unreadable. Arthur shifted tactics, performing a move Reynolds didn't expect. Reynolds sidestepped just in time. Arthur grabbed him, attempting to throw. Reynolds regained balance, landing smoothly. After several exchanges, Reynolds acknowledged Arthur's skill, but warned that he'd been holding back. Clenching his fists, Reynolds summoned blazing mana, preparing to unleash his full power. In this world, mages are born with elemental affinities, often identified through costly early tests. Conjurers can manifest elemental power immediately, while Augmenter's affinity becomes clear only after milestones. Reynolds' years of self-training brought him to master fire by the Orange Core stage. Arthur, from a world where elemental power was chosen, had learned a few tricks since arriving. Arthur and his father squared off, the air thick with anticipation. As they stood eye to eye, a faint crackling energy shimmered around Arthur's hand, a quiet power he had kept tucked away until now. Vincent High, standing nearby, couldn't hide his astonishment. Witnessing Arthur's status as a deviant was impressive enough, but seeing him unleash this hidden strength left the seasoned auctioneer slack-jawed. Even Reynolds, who had radiated confidence just moments before, seemed momentarily unsettled by the display. Without hesitation, Arthur lunged forward, launching the first strike. What followed was a blur of rapid exchanges, fists and blows trading between father and son with mounting intensity. Their strikes grew so fierce and synchronized that, at one point, a thunderous explosion erupted between them, a shockwave that rippled through the air, drawing the attention of people miles away. It was clear neither was willing to yield. Their fight escalated with relentless passion. After a relentless series of punches, Reynolds finally landed a solid hit on Arthur's cheek. But rather than feeling discouraged, Arthur's expression brightened. This was exactly the kind of challenge he had expected from his father. Reynolds's punches sharpened in precision, his longer reach keeping Arthur at bay, attempting to prevent him from closing the distance. Yet Arthur refused to be outmatched. With nimble agility, he ducked low and unleashed a perfectly timed uppercut, a move so precise that failure wasn't an option. The sheer surprise of the strike left everyone watching wide-eyed and speechless. And as you might expect, Arthur halted the blow mid-swing, recognizing that ending the fight there would be unnecessary. Instead, he embraced his father tightly, the moment thick with pride and unspoken respect. Turning to Arthur's unique gifts, his lightning affinity stood out as his most potent deviant power. However, he still had a long journey ahead. His ice magic remained unstable, and he hadn't yet tapped into the realms of sound or gravity. Despite that, Arthur allowed himself a small moment to brag to his parents, a quiet satisfaction in his progress. Vincent, on the other hand, looked utterly drained. The day's events had been more than he could handle. Slowly pulling himself together from a state of exhaustion, he suggested Arthur enroll at Zyrus Academy. But Arthur's response was lukewarm. The idea didn't thrill him. Even Reynolds seemed uncertain about sending his young son to the continent's most prestigious magic institution at such a tender age. Mrs. High, however, backed her husband's suggestion. Given Arthur's talent, she believed it might be worthwhile for their family to sponsor his tuition, removing that burden. But Alice firmly refused, determined not to accept any more favors after all the Helstia family had already done. Vincent assured her it wouldn't be a burden. He had a strong connection with the Academy's famed director and could arrange everything discreetly. Just then, Arthur finally spoke, his voice calm but firm. He didn't appreciate everyone discussing his future and making decisions without consulting him. Having just reunited with his family that day, he wanted time to bond before contemplating another separation for schooling. After the dinner, everyone prepared for bed. Before sleep claimed them, both parents expressed their deep gratitude that Arthur had returned, proud and amazed at how much he'd grown. The thought of their son as a deviant with potential to be one of the strongest mages was staggering. His mother's tone softened with a hint of sadness as she remarked that Arthur no longer gave her goodnight kisses now that he was growing up. Seeing her earnest plea, Arthur leaned over and planted a sweet kiss on her cheek. With the parents ready to retire, Reynolds paused one last time. He reminded Arthur not to hold any grudge against Vincent for his earlier excitement. The man meant no harm. The scene then shifted back to Vincent's suggestion about the academy. Arthur made it clear he wanted to spend some time with his family before making such a life-changing decision, respectfully excusing himself from the dining area. As he made his way to his room, Lilia suddenly appeared, startling him. She pointed out that he was heading the wrong way and invited him to a better spot where they could talk. They eventually arrived at the servants' quarters, where it became clear Lilia had a remarkable rapport with the staff. The servants welcomed them warmly, even sharing food. Lilia's cheerful energy brought smiles to their faces. One maid confided in Arthur that Lady Lilia often escaped to the servants' quarters whenever stress overwhelmed her. In that moment, Arthur realized something he hadn't noticed before. The Helstia family's kindness and genuineness were real, touching everyone around them. Back with his parents, Arthur reassured them, clearing any doubts. He held no ill will toward the Helstia family. In fact, he recognized their warmth and sincerity. The next morning, Arthur was awakened by Sylvie's excited chirping. The little dragon's eagerness reminded him suddenly of Tesha, and a pang of longing flared briefly before a sharp whiff interrupted his thoughts. Sylvie was less than fresh. Clearly, Arthur wasn't the only one facing a shower that morning. Approaching the bathtub, Sylvie recoiled at the sight of the water, retreating timidly. Sometime later, both emerged fresh and renewed. Just as they finished, a soft knock sounded on the door. It was Arthur's little sister, come to greet her big brother with a bright good morning. Their mother had promised a day of shopping, a chance for the siblings to bond and learn more about each other. Excited, the little one bounced on her feet, and together they raced down the corridor to join the family for breakfast. Later, at the bustling marketplace, Arthur found himself enchanted by the vibrant energy. Merchants shouted to attract customers, the air thick with the scent of spices and fresh produce. His attention snagged on a curious shop displaying crystal balls and mounted monster heads. He asked his mother about it. Mrs. Helstia explained patiently. Those crystal balls were beast cores, magical fragments extracted from mana beasts, used to amplify one's power. However, their effects varied wildly, depending on the type and origin of the mana beast. Buying them was a gamble. Prices could reach hundreds or even thousands of gold coins. Sometimes, a lucky purchaser might acquire a core containing a beast will. Arthur's jaw dropped at the thought of such extravagant sums. Mrs. Helstia added that her auction house frequently received shipments of beast cores and even infant mana beasts. She invited Arthur to visit and explore the collection whenever he wished. At that moment, Lillian nudged Arthur excitedly, urging him to come along to a spot she'd been eager to show him. A short walk later, they arrived at a barber shop. Arthur hesitated, unsure if a haircut was necessary, but his mother insisted. "You've been looking like a mess," she said with a teasing grin. "It's time to fix that." Inside, the barber was a character straight out of a fantasy anime, all flamboyant gestures and enthusiastic commentary. He clearly enjoyed his work and wasn't shy about praising Arthur's feminine charm, which sent Arthur's inner self into mild panic. After the cut, Arthur grinned for the big reveal. The new look suited him, sharp, confident, earning an enthusiastic thumbs up from little Ellie. After finishing their visit to the barber, Arthur and Lilia returned to the lively streets of the marketplace. As they crossed a familiar stone bridge, Arthur's eyes caught a small group of boys gathered below, jeering at someone. Ellie quickly explained that they were students from Zyrus Academy. Wearing the academy's uniform was a significant status symbol here, granting the students a sense of entitlement. Arthur didn't need to see them up close to understand they were arrogant and rude. He shared her disdain, noting that their privileged treatment made them behave as if the entire market belonged to them. Soon, their mothers arrived, and Alice asked what they had been discussing. At that moment, Arthur suddenly darted forward with a childlike enthusiasm, his excitement a mystery to his mother, who could only smile at seeing him behave like a normal child again. Mrs. High, too, was relieved to witness Arthur's carefree demeanor after the intense events of the previous night. The group then entered a shop filled with weapons and armor. Arthur eagerly inspected every item, his curiosity palpable. The shopkeeper approached, gently advising Arthur that the place was not suitable for children and suggesting he leave soon. At that moment, a wealthy young man oozing arrogance approached and arrogantly reminded Arthur that these items were not toys for a boy like him. The man even placed a hand on Arthur's shoulder, but Arthur effortlessly brushed it off, showing no respect for the young man's presumptuous behavior. After delivering a pointed retort, Arthur began to walk away. The arrogant man, unwilling to accept being humiliated by a child, attempted to assert his status and wealth. However, before he could continue, Mrs. Elise Helstia entered the shop and immediately took control of the situation. Recognizing the man as Agastas from the Ravener branch family, she warned him that any further disrespect would lead to the revocation of his family's participation in the Helstia auction house. The man's demeanor crumbled instantly, and he began to plead meekly. After this incident, the group continued their tour of the town. Arthur expressed his thanks to Mrs. High, who responded with a laugh, confessing she had been more worried about what Arthur might do than the man's behavior. Unbeknownst to them, a shadowy figure observed the family, eyes fixed intently on the small dragon perched on Arthur's shoulder. As night fell over Zyrus, the party returned to their mansion. Vincent, Helstia, and Reynolds were waiting, seated together in conversation. Vincent rose to introduce a distinguished visitor, Cynthia Goodsky, founder and director of Zyrus Academy. She greeted Arthur warmly, expressing pleasure at finally meeting the boy Vincent had spoken so highly of. Zyrus Academy's reputation preceded it. The institution was renowned as the premier school for aspiring mages with talent and noble heritage. It had produced many of the world's most influential scholars, guild leaders, royal guards, and military commanders. At its helm was Cynthia Goodsky, whose presence commanded respect. Arthur found himself silently staring at Cynthia as she extended her hand in greeting. The silence between them grew palpable, drawing attention from nearby observers. Eventually, Arthur shook her hand, uncertain of the proper etiquette. Alice quickly apologized for his unfamiliarity, explaining that he had just returned and was not yet accustomed to formal customs. Cynthia smiled kindly, reassuring them she understood and was grateful to Vincent for arranging the visit. Lilia stood quietly apart, her mood subdued. It was clear she was uneasy with the attention focused on Arthur, or perhaps anxious about his impending departure to the academy. Nearby, an elderly woman revealed that visits to potential students' homes were rare. Vincent's insistence had intrigued her, prompting her to request that Mrs. Helstia guide her to an open area where she might assess Arthur's abilities. Arthur attempted to avoid the situation by claiming hunger, but his mother refused to let him escape. Vincent and Mrs. Helstia led Cynthia to the mansion's courtyard. Arthur's stomach growled in protest, matched by Sylvie's equally unhappy expressions. The old woman's attention shifted to Sylvie, whom she found intriguing. She inquired if Sylvie was Vincent's contracted beast. Arthur clarified that Sylvie was his own bond, having hatched only a few months prior. He described Sylvie's mother, a scaled wolf with small wings, who had been mortally wounded while protecting her egg. Finding the nest had been a fortunate coincidence. Cynthia listened attentively but withheld judgment. After a brief walk, they arrived at the courtyard. Cynthia's anticipation was clear. She was eager to see if Arthur's capabilities matched Vincent's praises or if they were overstated. Vincent had only mentioned Arthur was an augmenter and left details sparse, intending to surprise Cynthia. Cynthia scrutinized Arthur carefully. He seemed composed, neither nervous nor arrogant. Whether it was confidence or naivety, she could not tell. Arthur, however, was focused on something far less serious. His mind was consumed by the thought of grilled fish awaiting dinner. Vincent wore a smug grin, clearly savoring the moment. "Wait until Cynthia sees Arthur's fire and lightning magic," he said with confidence. "She's going to be blown away." He let out a chuckle, relieved that Reynolds wouldn't be accidentally torching the courtyard again like last time. Just before Arthur stepped forward, Cynthia raised an eyebrow. "You don't plan to arm yourself?" "Not even a wand?" she asked with a hint of amusement. Arthur replied casually, "I can tell you're not about to draw that wand on your waist, so I'll go barehanded too." Cynthia paused, a flicker of surprise crossing her face before she cracked a genuine smile. They both nodded and agreed to start the match. During Arthur's training with Virion, the explosive force of fire and the adaptable flow of water were the first elemental arts from his world to materialize fully here. Later, the martial techniques involving earth and wind from his previous life matured, enabling him to weave internal and ambient mana into precise effects. Unlike counters, these fundamentals are how augmenters manifest elemental attacks. Still, limitations remained. Arthur slammed his foot into the ground, shattering the earth beneath him effortlessly. Vincent, expecting surprises, was still shaken to his core by the display. Among the stunned crowd, only Arthur's proud sister and Sylvie showed pure excitement as he dominated the stage. With a decisive kick, Arthur sent shards of shattered earth flying towards Cynthia. She smiled warmly, clearly recognizing his talent, and blocked the debris with ease. Arthur gathered himself and summoned a massive blast from the ground, propelling himself forward. Breaking through the barrier of air surrounding Cynthia, he aimed a strike at her face. She countered flawlessly, pushing him back with a surge of power. Arthur reacted swiftly, conjuring a floating stone with earth and wind magic to steady his fall. He clenched his teeth, frustrated by the challenge of combining earth and wind even after extensive training with Virion. These elements felt far trickier than fire and water. He launched himself at Cynthia again, but she effortlessly pushed him away with wind magic, denying him any chance to get close or deal damage. Amid swirling gusts, she chanted an unusual spell, summoning several tornadoes. Arthur had a plan. He conjured wind around his hands, spinning opposite to the tornadoes, clashing fiercely. The tornadoes dispersed, but the reckless move left Arthur nursing cuts and bruises. He had achieved his goal. The elderly woman watched approvingly, complimenting his skill and precision. Yet she warned him he was overconfident in charging headlong into battles. Overall, his magical and combat prowess were exceptional. For his final challenge, she enchanted Arthur with a spell, telling him to simply remain conscious. The sensation felt like his mind was being torn apart, a clear sign of sound magic at work, confirming her deviant nature. Despite the agony Arthur endured, when it ended, she beamed. "You've passed with flying colors," she declared. Impressed by his wind magic aptitude, she admitted she was tempted to personally take him as a student. Reynolds looked confused. "Since when did Arthur learn earth and wind magic?" he asked. The mention caught the woman off guard. She realized Arthur might be able to wield even more elements. Vincent quickly chimed in. He used fire just yesterday, and lightning too. Brought him to the courtyard because he accidentally burned the lawn. The woman was utterly stunned. This young boy controlled at least 3 elements, none yet at deviant levels, but still impressive. Arthur corrected her gently. Actually, I can use 4 elements. He demonstrated by conjuring water, causing the woman to recoil in disbelief. Reynolds nodded in agreement, clearly impressed. Lilia, watching quietly, asked if her brother was strong. Her mother stayed silent, but Cynthia laughed softly. Yes, she said, and he will be even stronger in the future. Later, as the family settled down, Arthur's chest tightened. He apologized for keeping his powers secret. Seeing his mother's worry reminded him how deeply his silence had hurt her. She hoped for no more secrets, but Arthur knew he couldn't promise that yet. Once the apologies were done, Cynthia asked to speak privately with Arthur. She enclosed them in a soundproof bubble, assuring him he could speak freely. Arthur explained he'd only revealed his abilities because she had 2 things he needed: power and influence. He wanted her to protect his family until he was strong enough himself. He pledged to attend her academy and consider her his benefactor. Cynthia was taken aback, not by his words, but by his boldness. Few, not even Supon's king and queen, would dare propose such a one-sided deal. Yet Arthur smiled knowingly, aware of his value compared to rulers. Though the deal would wait until he enrolled, Arthur was confident. He had promised someone important to live fully and believed attending Zyrus Academy at a normal age would help him honor that. Cynthia seemed unsettled by having to wait 3 years before his arrival. She pressed him on his plans during that gap. Arthur didn't hesitate. He spoke his mind. He planned to become an adventurer first. Later, his parents took him aside, clearly opposed. His mother was the most distraught, berating him after all they'd endured. After thinking he was lost for years, he now wanted to put himself in danger again, a thought she couldn't bear. The youngest sibling began to cry, overwhelmed by her mother's anger. Reynolds stepped in to calm the storm, urging everyone to listen to Arthur's reasoning. But Alice wasn't ready to relent, questioning how he could consider such recklessness after all they'd survived. Her emotions overwhelmed her completely, crashing like a storm that left her mind clouded with worry and pain, blurring the lines between right and wrong until she could no longer see clearly. In the midst of her turmoil, Arthur's voice rose steadily, calm and unwavering as he spoke. He assured her that he had no intention of leaving soon. Rather, he looked forward to spending several months at home with everyone. The years he had spent in the Elven Kingdom had left him feeling distant, like a stranger returning to a world he no longer recognized. He confessed that he longed to feel the excitement and challenge that his parents had known as adventurers, not merely to seek danger for its own sake, but to truly live, to understand the world, and to grow stronger in ways that the safety of home could not provide. His father listened intently, nodding with understanding. He recalled his own youth when, newly awakened, he too had yearned to explore the unknown and test his limits. Yet he also recognized the validity of Alice's concerns, knowing full well the dangers and uncertainties that awaited on the path of an adventurer, no matter how prepared one might feel. Arthur suggested that perhaps having a guard or companion to accompany him on his journeys might alleviate their fears, offering a measure of safety. Still, Alice's apprehension remained, a heavy weight she could not easily set aside. Unexpectedly, Reynolds lent his support to Arthur's plan. Alice's shock was palpable as she struggled to reconcile this endorsement with her own fears. It was hard to imagine letting their son go again after just having him home. Tension filled the room, but Arthur moved to ease it, explaining that he had no intention of disappearing for years on end and planned to return home frequently between missions. Despite this, Alice's skepticism lingered, unwilling to fully accept his reassurances. At that moment, Ellie approached her brother, her eyes shining with unshed tears as the thought of his departure pressed heavily upon her young heart. Arthur's own tightened, and he hurried to comfort her, promising that he would be around often and that his absences would be brief. Alice still hesitated to give her blessing, demanding to understand why Arthur wished to pursue the perilous life of an adventurer so soon after his return. In her eyes, it seemed far more sensible that he focus on schooling and stability first. Arthur gently reminded them that beginning school now would place him far younger than his peers, isolating him socially. He desired to belong and forge friendships, but the age gap threatened to hinder that. His mother then proposed postponing formal education in favor of training under her and Reynolds' guidance. Arthur welcomed the idea but emphasized that training alone was insufficient. He craved real challenges and the chance to test his skills in unpredictable, open environments where true growth was possible. Though much of this ambition he kept unspoken, it drove his every step forward. The following morning found the families gathered around a breakfast table, joined by the Helstia clan. The room was alive with warm conversation and laughter. Arthur inquired about their plans for the day. Mrs. Helstia explained that she and Alice needed to run errands in preparation for an upcoming event at the Helstia auction house. Ellie and Lilia would accompany them, and Arthur was invited to join but chose to remain at home. Vincent took the opportunity to ask if a decision had been reached regarding Arthur's plans for adventuring. Alice disclosed that she had consented, but only with strict conditions. Reynolds outlined them clearly. Arthur must wait until after his birthday in 3 months, be accompanied by a guard at all times during missions, and return home at least once every 2 months. Reynolds expressed his confidence in Arthur's maturity and ability to manage the rest independently. Vincent agreed but raised a critical question: who could serve as Arthur's guard? From what he had seen, few could match Arthur's abilities sufficiently to provide effective protection. Meanwhile, Ellie amused herself by balancing 2 forks atop her head, imitating Sylvie's horns. Reynolds smiled and shared news that the Twin Horns Adventure Group would soon return from a dungeon expedition. One of their members could serve as Arthur's protector. The suggestion was met with immediate approval, even from Alice. Arthur's face brightened at the prospect. The Twin Horns had escorted him home years ago, and he looked forward to reuniting with Jasmine, Durand, Angela, Helen, and Adam. Later, Arthur met with Vincent in his office to discuss further arrangements, while the women went shopping. During the outing, Ellie and Alina clashed. Alina, older and quick-tempered, teased Ellie relentlessly. Mrs. Helstia intervened, gently reprimanding her, confessed her jealousy toward Arthur, resenting his rapid advancement as a mage while she had yet to awaken. Deep inside, she longed for her own magical power. Alice offered comfort and encouragement, reminding her that growth was a personal journey and everyone's time would come. Despite this reassurance, it pressed to know how Arthur had achieved such strength so quickly. Alice admitted she did not know the full story. Apart from some sword training with Reynolds, they had not cultivated his talents extensively. Mrs. Helstia was surprised, sensing a deeper mystery. She urged Alice to seek answers directly from Arthur. Alice acknowledged that Arthur was keeping secrets, and even they as his parents did not grasp the full truth. Mrs. Helstia advised patience, encouraging them to allow Arthur to share when he was ready. With these concerns temporarily set aside, the families resumed their day. As the group threaded their way through Zyrus's bustling streets, a shadowy figure kept them under close watch. From the dim back alleys, this man met another cloaked in mystery. He spoke quietly, relaying news to be passed on to Lord Sebastian. The mana beast wasn't with the group today, he said, and there was a mage from Zyrus Academy guarding them, made tailing them impossible. He added that the boy, most likely the beast's master, was expected to attend the Helstia auction house's 10th anniversary event. His companion nodded, promising to alert Lord Sebastian immediately. That auction will be our best chance to act. Meanwhile, inside a quiet chamber, Vincent Helstia sat facing Arthur. The boy's calm yet commanding presence filled the room. It was as if Vincent were in the presence of a king rather than a teenager. The nervousness Vincent felt rivaled that of meeting Supon's reigning monarch. Arthur's demeanor now stood in sharp contrast to the carefree youth Vincent had seen among family earlier. The relaxed boy had been replaced by someone radiating true authority. Adjusting his glasses to steady himself, Vincent greeted Arthur with formal respect. Arthur wasted no time, explaining the reason for his unexpected visit. He requested Vincent's help in acquiring a few essentials: a protective cloak with a hood, a sword suited to his size, and a mask capable of altering his voice. Vincent nodded. The cloak won't be difficult to get, but crafting a mask that changes your voice, that'll need an artificer skilled in sound magic, probably a divination mage. Vincent paused briefly, questioning his own generosity. With the anniversary event consuming his time, why was he bending over backward for this boy? Yet despite the thought, he couldn't refuse. Something about Arthur demanded it. Arthur, for his part, was deeply grateful, though he had no money to offer. Searching his mind for a way to repay Vincent's kindness, he found one quickly. Vincent, however, refused any compensation. He explained that Arthur's father had been invaluable since their partnership began. Thanks to Reynolds' training, thefts and fights at the auction house had plummeted. Still, Arthur insisted on offering something. Recently, he had discovered a technique that could accelerate his sister's awakening as a mage. If he could help his sister, then he could help Lilia awaken too. Vincent's eyes widened in surprise. Neither he nor his wife possessed magical talent, yet Arthur spoke with confidence that he could guide their daughter toward awakening and eventually entrance to Zyrus Academy. Later, Arthur practiced his beast will. Despite his efforts, he could wield it only for fleeting seconds before it faded. Frustration crept in. He felt his progress was lacking. Whether in this life or the last, strength was necessary to protect those he loved. His mind drifted to memories of loss, a life taken in helplessness. This time he vowed his power would be for protection, not revenge. Descending the stairs, Arthur encountered his mother returning from errands. Her expression was stern, frustration clear. She accused him of making false promises about helping Lilia awaken. Mrs. Helstia's annoyance at the idea of Arthur playing pranks was unmistakable. Arthur assured her firmly that he would never joke about something so serious. He reminded them of the pact he had made with Mr. Helstia. As the family settled, Arthur sat between his sisters, preparing to demonstrate something unexpected. He began explaining how mana was best sensed through slow, deep breaths following a precise rhythm. He kept the explanation simple and clear. Closing his eyes, Arthur demonstrated the first breathing step. His sisters struggled initially to match the pattern, but gradually improved. He cautioned them their bodies might feel warm and urged them to continue breathing as instructed. As they persisted, small white sparks began to appear, visible to their eyes. Arthur explained these sparks were their allies, small friends that needed to unite to thrive. After the session, all three of them were completely exhausted. Vincent peppered Arthur with questions, curious how this method could help Lilia awaken. Arthur answered that it would take years, but believed that with proper training during the first months, Lilia's awakening as a mage was well within reach. Before he could finish, Mrs. Helstia embraced him tightly, overwhelmed with emotion. Tears fell freely as she realized Arthur had opened a world of possibilities for their daughter, opportunities beyond what non-mage parents could offer. Vincent, too, was visibly moved, the moment heavy with shared hope. From then, Arthur's life settled into a steady rhythm, morning training, helping his sisters edge closer to awakening, and balancing his own impatience with moments spent cherishing family. He knew these days were precious and rare. 2 months later, the long-awaited day arrived. Arthur stood nervously before the door, eager for the twin horns' return. When a knock came, he flung open the door to find Angela bursting through with a fierce hug. Duran followed, his imposing figure softened by the warmth of the reunion. Memories stirred, times they had shared, battles fought together. Adam entered with his usual lively energy, while Helen playfully scolded him for his antics. Jasmine, quiet and reserved, stepped forward last. Tears welled as she hugged Arthur, whispering apologies for past failures to protect him. As the group gathered, preparing for the day ahead, the gentlemen descended after finishing their preparations. Once everyone assembled near the mansion's exit, they readied themselves to depart for the Helstia auction house. The carriages awaited, their wheels clattering against the cobblestones as they pulled away, slicing through the city's lively streets with purpose. Seated together within one of the carriages, Arthur began to share the story of how he had returned to them. His voice carried the weight of the journey, every twist, every trial that had brought him to this moment. Listening intently, Adam expressed heartfelt apologies for the hardships Arthur had endured since his fall from the cliff. Yet they found solace in the bond Arthur had forged, a connection even seasoned adventurers and nobles rarely achieve. Suddenly, the carriage came to a sharp halt. 2 servants stepped forward, their presence signaling the arrival. Arthur's breath caught as he beheld the Helstia auction house for the first time. The grandeur of the 10th anniversary event was apparent, This gathering was more than a celebration. It was an opportunity for nobles and adventurers alike to glimpse and acquire priceless artifacts kept hidden and guarded until this moment. The building's exterior dazzled with architectural splendor, but it was the interior that truly captivated. Vincent addressed the group, his tone earnest as he reminded them of the day's importance and urged focus to prevent any errors. Reynolds took command, assigning soldiers to their stations with practiced authority. Before the crowd, Arthur, Mrs. Helstia, and Alice entered the grand auditorium ahead of the others. The vast hall could easily hold over 10,000 souls. Though Arthur had lived among the royalty of the Elenoir kingdom, even he was awestruck by the scale and majesty surrounding him. Mrs. Helstia inquired about his impression, to which Arthur replied that calling it a mere house was an understatement. Lilia smiled knowingly, promising that the private viewing rooms atop the building would leave him even more amazed. As expected, the private rooms were exquisite, complete with a well-stocked bar and a bartender ready to serve. Peering through the windows, Lilia and Ison observed the early arrivals, the building already alive with activity. A servant soon announced the arrival of VIP guests. The family rose respectfully as knights escorted the esteemed visitors inside. King Blaine Glader, Queen Priscilla Glader, Prince Curtis Glader, and Princess Kathleen Glader. Curious about sharing the space with such royalty, the king asked Vincent why his family was present. Vincent reminded His Majesty that this was his family, brought here at the king's expressed wish. Vincent then introduced his wife and daughter Lilia, followed by Alice Lewin, wife of his close friend, and their children Arthur and Eleanor Lewin. The king, relaxed and affable, warmly welcomed them, inviting all the children to rise. "Vincent's friends are my friends," he said with genuine warmth. "We're here to celebrate the auction's 10th anniversary and enjoy the event together." Queen Glader's attention soon fell on the small mana beast Arthur carried. Arthur explained that Sylvie had hatched just months ago. The king's curiosity deepened as he asked if this creature was Arthur's bond. Arthur nodded without hesitation. The king's fondness for the little beast was evident as he gently tickled Sylvie. "A rare gift," he remarked. "Even infant mana beasts are difficult to tame, yet she seems obedient." Arthur explained their relationship was more a mutual bond than mere obedience, communicating mentally with Sylvie. Suddenly, an elderly man interrupted, questioning if Arthur implied an equal contract with the beast. Arthur hesitated briefly, then affirmed that Sylvie had initiated their pact. The old man reached to inspect Arthur's hand, seeking proof of their bond, but the king intervened swiftly. "This is neither the time nor place to examine someone's companion," he admonished. The man stumbled back, offering profuse apologies to ease the tension. Mrs. Helstia reminded the king that the event was about to begin and suggested everyone take their seats. Rumors whispered that this very old man might be connected to the hooded figures who had shadowed Arthur and his family. At last, the Helstia Auction House's 10th anniversary event commenced. The host welcomed the distinguished crowd to their most anticipated occasion, the opportunity to acquire the rarest and most coveted items. Excitement rippled through the guests, their cheers filling the auditorium. The host then directed everyone to face south as the formal honors began. Special recognition was given to the royal family of Suppin. The audience responded with respect befitting their status. With the honors concluded, the host introduced the man who made the event possible, Vincent Helstia. As Vincent stepped forward, Arthur and the others applauded. The moment stirred memories of Arthur's past life as a king, though he fought to keep such thoughts at bay. After all, he hadn't even hit his growth spurt yet. Dreaming of kingship was premature. Slipping away unnoticed, Arthur managed to sneak a drink from the bar. Nearby, Lilia and Ellie kept busy, and Arthur's gaze fell upon his mother, conversing with the queen. Observing the queen's wand, he deduced she was a conjurer, a magician. The fact that he could not sense her presence suggested she either wielded a powerful concealment artifact or possessed such immense strength that her aura evaded detection. The queen's glance landed on him, causing a flicker of embarrassment. Arthur reflected on his peculiar disinterest in the older women. His romantic prospects seemed stunted, perhaps a side effect of his mother's age group or the complexity of his past life. Neither the younger women nor his peers stirred any feelings. His dating life, it seemed, was in a temporary state of limbo. His reverie was broken when Vincent approached, Aware of Arthur's desire for a quality sword, Vincent offered a once-in-a-lifetime chance. A short sword crafted by a legendary master smith was about to go on the block. The weapon's qualities were exceptional. Just a trace of mana would cause electricity to dance along the blade's edge, enhancing its cutting power and even inflicting paralysis on foes. Interest peaked. Arthur watched as bidding commenced. Guests competed fiercely, prices soaring past 50 gold coins. To put that in perspective, a single gold coin could sustain a modest family for decades. The opening bid alone represented a fortune. Vincent, casually adopting the tone of a billionaire indulging his heir, asked Arthur if the blade appealed to him. Arthur confirmed he liked it but sought something less flashy, a response Vincent had anticipated and accepted. As for the other items Arthur requested, Vincent assured him they had already been arranged. Arthur's excitement bubbled over as he anticipated the arrival of the voice-altering mask among the auction's prized items. Vincent, ever the high roller, exuded the swagger of someone who could pull artifacts from the farthest corners of the world on a whim. With that signature urgency of a Wall Street dealmaker closing a multi-million-dollar trade, Vincent made it happen, securing the exact item Arthur desired. The boy's grin was the widest Vincent had ever seen, though, like any responsible adult, Vincent offered a knowing warning. Use that thing wisely, kid. Otherwise, it'll be me getting a call from your family to bail you out. Vincent's prediction proved spot on. The sword, impressive as it was, quickly became overshadowed by the rarer and far more coveted items that followed. Even the king found himself drawn in, placing jaw-dropping bids on an A-class beast core. Though the core's powers remained dormant, the mere potential to unlock a beast will send ripples through the room. Arthur stretched out, shaking off creeping lethargy, only to realize Sylvie was nowhere to be found. He glanced at Lilia, who shrugged with equal confusion. Rising, Arthur began inspecting the furnishings when a sudden hiss cut through the quiet, tiny, frightened sound. Sylvie's soft yet sharp cry revealed the source. The ugly bastard Sebastian, a shadowy royal mage infamous for his ruthlessness, was attempting to seize her. The little dragon whimpered in terror. Arthur's protective instincts flared. Any pet owner worth their salt knows that look the moment their best friend is threatened. Though his gut screamed to deck Sebastian, he held back, aware that this was no ordinary opponent. Calling Sylvie to his side, Arthur prepared to leave. But Sebastian, undeterred and dripping with venom, sneered. A commoner like you shouldn't own such a rare creature. His sinister smile deepened as he claimed, "That beast will be mine soon enough." Arthur's blood boiled. His gaze sharpened into a deadly challenge, daring the mage to repeat those words. Let's rewind a moment. Vincent, slightly frustrated, had struggled to find Arthur a sword he truly wanted. The boy's simple request had left Vincent pondering if the storage vault might hold something suitable. His thoughts were interrupted by the king, pleased with his own acquisition of the A-class beast core. As long as its will remains intact, that one's in good hands, the monarch remarked. Vincent was quietly proud to have pleased royalty with his modest auction. Then darkness struck. Vincent's gaze hardened as an overwhelming bloodlust rippled through the crowd, forcing him to his knees. Royal knights sprang into action, weapons drawn and ready. The king unsheathed his sword, commanding the attacker to reveal themselves immediately. The royal mage Sebastian collapsed, visibly shaken by Arthur's wrath. Vincent struggled to comprehend the chaos unfolding. The knights swept the auction house, finding no other threats. Arthur's father ordered a search of the upper floors. Eventually, silence fell as both families sat in tense telepathic communion. Arthur checked Sylvie's condition through their bond, relieved she was unharmed. The knights reported capturing an intruder moments earlier. The king's composed reaction sent chills down Arthur's spine. The disruption, though unwelcome, served as the perfect diversion from his own troubles. As for Sebastian, the once feared royal mage became a figure of mockery. Faced with a level 1 intruder, he fumbled an excuse about slipping, shooting Arthur a spiteful glance before retreating. The auction resumed. The final item emerged, a magnificent infant world lion. Gasps swept through the crowd. This mana beast, carefully nurtured, held a promise of becoming an A-class beast. Arthur's irritation simmered as the mage overseeing the auction showed little care for any beast other than Sylvie. The host began the opening bid at 500 gold coins. Bids climbed steadily, 550, 600, even 800, until the king calmly stepped forward, doubling the starting price with a 1,000 gold coin offer. The crowd fell silent. No one dared compete with royal wealth. Vincent congratulated the king, inquiring about plans for the new pet. Recognizing the responsibility of raising such a beast, the king entrusted Curtis with its care. Curtis accepted the honor eagerly, while his mother teased him, lightening the moment. Arthur observed, amused, how even royal families could behave like any other. Vincent declared the auctions closed and asked the king about his acquisitions. The king intended to claim his prizes immediately. Just then, the royal mage whispered something to the king and shot a sharp glance at Arthur. Clear signs another plan was afoot. Vincent escorted the royal family to the secure storage where their new items awaited, seizing the chance to help Arthur find a suitable sword. The king, noticing Arthur's interest, wondered aloud if the boy intended to take sword lessons. Since Curtis also showed interest, the king hoped for a future sparring match between the two. Sebastian scoffed, mocking Arthur as a mere commoner unworthy of such ambitions. Arthur bowed respectfully to the king's generosity, maintaining humility in front of his family. At that moment, Arthur's father entered, startled to see the king. The monarch praised Captain Lewin for capturing the intruder and learned that Arthur was his son. He introduced Sebastian as a royal guard who had faithfully served the king's family and was now seeking a reward, specifically Arthur's familiar. The announcement struck Arthur like a thunderclap. Reynolds immediately sensed the danger in the king's intentions. The king declared that surrendering Arthur's beast would serve the kingdom's welfare. Reynolds, reading his son's distress, tried to intervene. Prepared to offer substantial compensation, the king even proposed hiring a personal mage to sever the bond between Arthur and Sylvie. Reynolds submitted his resignation, stating that Arthur was old enough to make his own decisions and that he would not interfere. Dude, Ray is surely a loving father, no doubt. The king then turned to Arthur, who sat with frustration burning in his eyes. Sebastian attempted to ignite a magical flame, but the king stopped him. Calmly, the monarch greeted Arthur and reiterated the offer. Despite the grandeur, Arthur responded firmly, thanking the king but refusing to give up his familiar, even for the most priceless sword. Sebastian tried to speak but was silenced immediately by the king. The king then tossed in a rare world lion cub as a trade offer for Sylvie, which prompted an annoyed glance from Curtis. Arthur stood unwavering, his voice steady as he faced the king once more. If I wasn't clear before, let me say it plainly now, Sylvie will stay with me, no matter what. The king's face tightened, frustration flickering behind his eyes like a storm gathering on the horizon. I have shown you more patience than most would dare. And yet, you persist in defiance. Taking a measured breath, Arthur met the monarch's gaze with the quiet confidence of someone who has gambled and knows when to hold. Then, without hesitation, he asked the question that shifted the atmosphere like a sudden power outage in a crowded stadium. What price would you put on one of your own children? The hall fell deathly silent, the tension thick enough to be cut with a knife. The king's pride bristled, wounded by such boldness, but Arthur's words hung in the air, demanding an answer. If repeated refusals failed to sway the monarch, then perhaps knowing the true cost would force reconsideration. Sebastian, lurking at the edge of the room with a cruel smile, flicked his hand sharply. Instantly, the royal guard sprang into action, one charging forward with his blade humming ominously, eyes locked on the boy who dared insult the crown. But Arthur was no stranger to danger. Moving with the grace of a professional athlete evading a last-second tackle, he slipped past the attack effortlessly. His hand shot out, grasping the knight's fist and redirecting the force into a devastating uppercut. The guard collapsed like a toppled statue, unconscious before hitting the ground. Sebastian's smugness evaporated. The boy had just dismantled a royal guard like a system exploit. No longer holding back, Sebastian summoned a searing beam aimed to obliterate Arthur. As the spell flared, the world seemed to pause, the crowd froze in mid-gasp. Then, as suddenly as it appeared, the attack vanished. A voice rang out, clear and cold as a winter night. Ambient mana spells like that were useless against him. In the blink of an eye, Arthur appeared beside Sebastian, exploiting the mage's arrogance. One precise strike shattered Sebastian's leg, eliciting a guttural scream that echoed through the hall. Sebastian's desperate pleas for help met only silence. Arthur's voice cut through the tension. No one is coming. Rewinding briefly, even the king's eyes widened in disbelief. A commoner child dominating a royal guard. It was an unexpected glitch in the kingdom's defenses. Moments later, Arthur's body was found collapsed in a distant corridor. Lilia's panic flared fiercely. The scene darkened further as Sebastian, tears streaming down his sweat-soaked face, cried out for aid. The king himself winced, ordering urgent medical attention. Later, Reynolds knelt beside Arthur's still form. Alice poured every ounce of healing magic into him, but eventually admitted defeat. Some wounds transcended even her power. Vincent and his family stood quietly, mourning alongside them, the way the moment pressing down like an approaching storm. Hours drifted by. Arthur awoke to a relentless pounding in his head, the mental backlash from wielding the static void against Sebastian. Only through Sylvie's bond had he briefly slipped free from time's grasp, a godlike power reserved for legacy tamers. But the cost was immense. Years of training hadn't prepared him to sustain it beyond a few seconds without brutal consequences. His first real duel had left scars deeper than the surface. Exhausted, he closed his eyes once more. The door creaked open. Sylvie entered, alert and anxious. Alice's relief washed over her face as she saw him awaken. "It's been 8 hours," the doctor had said, longer than anyone hoped. Arthur's quiet frustration was enough to draw fresh tears. A sharp pang flared, drawing Alice's gaze. Yet Arthur's first question cut through the pain. "What happened after I passed out?" He learned the royal family had departed early, sending a representative to meet Reynolds. Curious, Arthur assured his mother he was fine and urged her to rest. Sylvie stayed loyally close. Downstairs, Reynolds discussed the incident. Arthur interrupted, revealing the envoy had arrived bearing gold coins, compensation for the chaos. Reynolds, loyal to family above all, dismissed royal favors. Jasper Wright, the envoy, greeted Arthur formally and presented the pouch of gold. Arthur, composed and shrewd, accepted the gesture with grace and learned both knights who attacked him had been promptly suspended. Reynolds remained wary. No token punishment could undo injustice. Tension crackled between Jasper and Reynolds, a quiet storm brewing beneath polite words. Arthur stepped forward, confessing that his behavior had been rash but assuring all he was unharmed, seeking to restore peace. Jasper nodded, acknowledging Arthur's maturity. "Sebastian has been suspended pending investigation," he said gravely. Arthur's curiosity pressed on. "What about Sebastian's injury? Do we know the cause?" Jasper's face tightened. "Sebastian claims you caused it," he admitted, though Captain Lewin doubts that. "There's talk that interference from a road knight's mana may have disrupted the spell, a tangled web, but it offers some explanation." Reynolds exchanged a hard look with Jasper, his skepticism clear. As the meeting concluded, Jasper handed over the pouch of gold coins, compensation for the disruption. Reynolds declined, stating quietly, "This is my son's fight. I trust him to manage it." Arthur felt the weight of his father's trust settle on his shoulders, a mix of relief and responsibility washing over him. Exhausted, he prepared to rest. Arthur carefully placed the pouch of coins into a drawer and felt a wave of relief wash over him. The tension that had threatened to explode earlier had finally settled, and though he still sensed his own limitations as a child trying to understand the vast world around him, hope flickered brightly. Soon he would become an adventurer, and with that, the possibilities would be endless. Later, sitting around a sturdy wooden table in a bustling tavern, Arthur listened as Reynolds laid out his proposal. The fiery-haired companion with the untamed mane was quick to voice his doubts, grumbling that babysitting Arthur sounded like a death sentence. "With that attitude, I'm pretty sure the kid's going to take me out before the month ends." The group chuckled, each sharing a knowing look, their laughter genuine but tinged with concern. Arthur smiled, appreciating their honesty. Reynolds admitted he'd initially thought Duran or Helen would take on the responsibility. Both friends, humble and dependable, had earned their rewards from past adventures. Duran waved off the idea of payment, saying, "We're family. Helping Arthur grow isn't about the coin." Helen agreed, mentioning they'd done well enough on their last raid to put money aside. Unexpectedly, Jasmine raised her hand. Known for her disdain toward escort missions, her willingness to volunteer surprised everyone. Helen was quick to support the choice, pointing out Jasmine's strengths. Duran's magic is all about big blasts, OE chaos. Defense? Not so much. Me? I'm no shield. Jasmine, though. She's the only augmenter here with an elemental affinity, making her the perfect protector. Alice's brow furrowed with concern, but Jasmine gave a casual thumbs up, as if volunteering to watch over Arthur was just another day at the office. The fiery redhead nodded approvingly. Let Jasmine do her thing. She's the best shot we've got. Duran reluctantly accepted the decision, though a hint of disappointment lingered. Reynolds reassured him with a grin. There'll be a next time. Arthur felt comforted. With Jasmine by his side, he'd be ready for whatever lay ahead. A few days later, the family visited Vincent's home. Lilia sat cross-legged, eyes closed, focused on meditation. Arthur had taught her the basics, emphasizing the importance of learning to harness her own power rather than depending solely on him. He believed Ellie could awaken at 7 or later if she committed to the practice, but hoped she wouldn't do so too soon, wary of the attention that premature awakening might draw. Eager as ever, Arthur asked his father if they could visit the auction house soon. He was eager to find a sword to call his own. Alice stayed behind, preparing a comforting meal. At the auction house, Vincent and his wife greeted them warmly, but wasted no time grilling Arthur about recent events. Though Arthur answered calmly, assuring them he was in good health, the tension over the king's handling of the situation was palpable. Vincent silently wished ill on the guards who had caused the trouble, and Reynolds shared that grim sentiment. To lighten the mood, Arthur turned his attention to the sword search. Vincent's eyes lit up with excitement as he led the boy through the maze of artifacts. The storage room was a treasure trove, packed with items sparkling like loot in a game, an adventurer's paradise. Arthur's excitement soon faded into frustration. Sword after sword failed to feel like a natural extension of his arm. He mused aloud, maybe it's because of all the augmenters now, so many dual-wield weapons that just don't fit me. He toyed with blades shaped like batarangs, no doubt in homage to a certain Dark Knight, and even tried channeling Bruce Lee with a pair of nunchucks, only to end up feeling clumsy. Then Sylvie's attention caught on a seemingly ordinary stick nearby. She tugged it eagerly toward Arthur. Surprised, he picked it up. The weight hit him immediately, not a mere stick, but a sword. He tried to unsheath it, but it resisted. Maybe it needed mana to unlock its true power? He tried again, casting a jolt of electricity to test the blade's response. Nothing. Frustrated, Arthur focused on the band around his arm. Concentrating, he activated his power. The sword suddenly shimmered with a mystical teal glow, capturing his full attention. Swinging it tentatively, the weapon moved with fluid grace, more like an extension of his body than a tool. Though heavy for now, he knew with training he'd master it. After a precise cut through a wooden barrel, Arthur smiled. The sword had the perfect balance and size. Engraved on the blade was an inscription, Dawn's Ballad, enigmatic and intriguing. Suddenly, a sharp electric sting shot through his hand. Sylvie looked on concerned, but Arthur assured her all was well. The sword's reaction remained a mystery. Moments later, the bloodstains vanished as if erased by magic. The weapon adjusted its weight and length seamlessly to match Arthur's frame. Feeling the newfound synchronicity, Arthur swung the blade effortlessly. It was like nothing he'd wielded before. He reflected on the countless swords from his past life. None had felt this perfectly attuned. He cut the barrel again, this time with finesse rather than brute force. Vincent and Reynolds arrived, calling him to leave as the day waned. Arthur grabbed the sword and a backup blade. Grateful Sylvie had led him to the right choice. Reynolds tested the weapon, noting minor flaws but ultimately deeming it perfect for Arthur's current needs. He eyed the practice stick at Arthur's belt and asked about it. Arthur, trying to keep his cool, admitted it was just for training. Vincent turned the cane over in his hands, genuinely baffled. Honestly, I've never come across this before, he muttered, eyebrows knitting together like he was trying to crack some ancient code. Calling over his assistant James, Vincent asked if there were any records. James shrugged. explaining the cane had been sold by some eccentric old merchant who claimed it was magical. They'd run it through every test possible: metal detectors, arcane analyzers, even called in a couple of the auction house's top appraisers, but every inspection came back the same: just a cane. "Maybe we should bring in a master artificer," James suggested. Arthur, feeling like the kid who just stumbled onto a secret level in a video game, blurted out an apology for barging in. The look Sylvie gave him, wide and innocent, like a puppy caught stealing snacks, melted Vincent's resistance. With a good-natured sigh, Vincent handed the cane back. "Can't keep this, sorry kid," he said with a smile. Arthur tucked it away like a hidden power-up in his inventory, a secret weapon no one else knew he had. Fast forward to Arthur's 9th birthday, a day treated like a VIP launch event. Vincent went all out, pulling in wait staff like a startup, rolling out a 5-star catering gig. The table groaned under the weight of dishes fit for royalty. Think gourmet sliders and craft sodas, not your run-of-the-mill medieval stew. Arthur caught himself smiling, knowing all too well he couldn't actually taste pixels on a screen, but the vibes were unforgettable. The redhead, everyone's lovable chaotic wildcard, was already a few drinks in, spilling the tea on Duran's legendary pants fire incident. Duran's mortified face was classic "please erase this moment" material. Jasmine jumped in with a savage jab at Adam, reminding the crowd of the time he basically had a bathroom emergency during a dungeon crawl. The kind of moment even Batman wouldn't want in his highlight reel. The whole room erupted in laughter, including Arthur and Sylvie, who practically did a little happy dance on his shoulder. When it came time for gifts, Reynolds and Alice had a surprise ready: a pair of gloves embedded with magical gems harvested from monster hunts. Each gem could trigger a one-time heal, like a get-out-of-jail-free card for the toughest fights ahead. Arthur's heart swelled as he hugged his parents, feeling ready to take on whatever quest awaited. Vincent upped the ante with a pair of enchanted rings, one for Arthur, one for Alice. The rings could ping Alice whenever Arthur's mana dipped too low, essentially turning her into the ultimate helicopter mom. Arthur eyed the rings, torn between the relief they'd bring and the constant ping-ping-ping stress they'd cause. Not to be outdone, Adam and Jasmine brought a sound transmission scroll. Think of it as the medieval version of voice memos, but with magical flair. You record a message, send it out, and the recipient can reply once before the scroll poofs into thin air. Arthur mused how lucky they were. In a world without smartphones, even one message felt like hitting the jackpot. The night ended with the group making plans for Arthur's application test. Reynolds was pumped. Alice, though worried, kissed her son with tears shining in her eyes. The love in that room was so palpable. Arthur promised silently he'd come back stronger, not just for himself, but for all of them. Jasmine waved goodbye with a wink, and though Arthur tried to sleep, his mind buzzed. He felt lucky to have a family who'd stand by him no matter what, fueling his drive to surpass even his days as a king. The next morning brought a different challenge, convincing Sylvie to take a bath. The stubborn little dragon put up a fight worthy of a viral pets versus bath time video. Mana shields and tantrums flew, but Arthur powered through with his own mana, gently coaxing her into the tub. Sylvie's tear-filled eyes said it all: betrayal of the highest order. Dressed and ready to roll, Arthur's parents beamed like proud stage parents. Reynolds reminded him not to get cocky and that Jasmine was his safety net if things got rough. Arthur promised to remember. Ellie, meanwhile, was a mess, crying, begging him not to go. Alice turned away, struggling to hold it together herself. She soothed Ellie, promising Arthur would be back soon, but the stubborn little one wouldn't budge. Kneeling, Arthur gave Ellie a serious mission: protect the family while he was gone. Her tear-streaked hug and promise to guard them showed she was ready. She proudly told him how her meditation practice let her see those little sparks of mana Arthur had taught her, like glowing fireflies of magic. Arthur's heart ached. He'd missed so much, but he knew he had to grow stronger for them. Alice hugged him tight, worried but hopeful. "We'll be okay," she said. As Arthur gripped the door handle, feeling the weight of their love, he stepped out. Once the door shut, Alice broke down into silent tears. Outside, Jasmine checked in, steady as ever. "Ready?" Arthur nodded, donning his voice-altering mask. The real adventure had officially begun. At the Adventurers Guild, the place buzzed with energy, scouts looking for promising conjurers and augmenters. Sylvie, already looking tired, walked beside Arthur, shifting her appearance subtly from dragon to sleek black lizard, a perfect disguise for blending in. As the group approached the reception desk, a poised woman greeted them warmly. Arthur opened his mouth to speak, but before he could, Jasmine confidently slapped a neatly folded note onto the counter, her sponsorship request for Arthur's rank examination. The receptionist nodded, pressed a button, and stepped out, leading them through a maze of polished corridors. She explained, "We got a full slate of exams today. But with a sponsor like Jasmine, we'll fast-track you right to the front, no waiting around in those endless queues." Arthur caught a handful of curious stares from passing guild members, and Jasmine muttered, "Just keep up for now." "You're the headline." They entered a second hall where Jasmine's status as an A-rank adventurer was known and respected. A tall, sharp-eyed man stepped forward, introducing himself as Caspian, branch manager. He asked casually about Jasmine's father, but the response was less than warm. Jasmine's glare alone made it clear she wasn't fond of the guy. Caspian outlined the usual application process: inspection, practical test, and a ton of bureaucracy. But thanks to Jasmine's sponsorship, he was willing to cut Arthur some slack. No inspections, no red tape. The only challenge left: a mock duel against an examiner. Judging by Arthur's stance and presence, Caspian pegged him as either a fighter or augmenter. Though usually indifferent to names, Caspian's interest peaked when he learned of Arthur's link to Jasmine. Arthur caught himself thinking about the mark on his mask, the half-note symbol from a music sheet, so he introduced himself simply as Note, extending a firm handshake. Their mutual assessment was unspoken but clear. This kid was no joke. The branch master handed them over to Mary, who would escort Arthur to the exam hall. Caspian shot a quick glance their way before disappearing down the hall. As they walked, Arthur mulled over the weight Jasmine's family name carried. No wonder she volunteered. He also caught her subtle annoyance when her father was mentioned. Whatever her reasons, he knew better than to pry. Mary led them through twisting hallways to the testing level. As Arthur stepped into the hall, a blinding shimmer of light momentarily overwhelmed him. Inside, one examiner deftly dodged a warrior's relentless strikes, the warrior dramatically announcing his moves like a bad comic book villain. Arthur couldn't help but smirk. Chanting your attack names before swinging was a rookie move. Even augmenters shouldn't be that cringe, he thought. When the warrior's spear was tossed aside, the examiner scoffed, verbally eviscerating him for weak mana control and sloppy technique. The man whined like a child trapped in a grown-up's body, definitely not ready for the big leagues. The examiner recommended an E-class placement but begrudgingly acknowledged a One-Punch Man-style fire affinity. With a slap on the face, figuratively speaking, the warrior was sent packing. Next up was Diane, a conjurer specializing in water magic, who quite literally couldn't make it up a flight of stairs without face-planting. The crowd erupted in laughter, and a bratty kid in the corner was quick to suggest she deserved E-class. Arthur quietly assessed the brat as a strong contender in his own right. Diane pulled herself together and confidently declared her specialty. The examiners already knew her and reassured her she'd be fine. Just pick her weapon and get ready. Arthur reflected that true conjurers mastered one element after crossing the orange stage, not like the avatar who awkwardly dabbled in 4. Some could duel specialize, but that meant even tougher tests. The examiner watched as Diane conjured a swirling water sphere around herself, a classic defensive setup. Jasmine whispered that conjurers lacked the mana reinforcement skills augmenters boasted, so defense came first. Her opponent countered with a mud spell that clouded Diane's vision, sparking a tense turn-based duel. Diane's water spiraled into a foggy explosion, giving her cover to strike, but the examiner cleverly appeared behind and landed a solid blow. Though she lost, Diane impressed with her elemental control. Her only misstep was not planning a secondary defense. Still, she earned a respectable C-class rank, no small feat for her age. Then came Elijah Knight, a name that sparked some confusion. The elite augmenter examiner took one look and instantly rated him B-class without testing. Arthur's eyebrows shot up. This was no ordinary kid. The next challenger was Lucas, a glasses-wearing brat with sky-high confidence demanding immediate ranking. The examiner sighed, choosing to ignore his antics. Lucas specialized in fire magic, reaching a light orange rank by age 11. Unheard of. Arthur braced himself, eager for this showdown. The conjurer's gaze bore into Lucas, her expression tight with skepticism. She could sense his arrogance like a flashing neon sign, yet he stood there completely unfazed, like a pro gamer casually brushing off a newbie's trash talk. Without hesitation, the test began. Lucas slammed his staff down on the polished stone floor with a resonant thud that echoed through the hall, immediately conjuring a towering ring of flames that roared like a pyrotechnic show at a music festival. From the fiery inferno, a colossal guardian burst forth, its blazing eyes locked onto the examiner as if it were about to drop the ultimate boss fight. Even the augmenter examiner, known for her calm precision, allowed herself a flicker of admiration. As expected from the Flamesworth lineage, she murmured, acknowledging the boy's raw talent. The guardian surged forward, an unstoppable tidal wave of fire and heat, but the examiner was ready. With a graceful flick of her wrist, massive earth spears erupted around her, slicing through the flames like a chainsaw through butter. The fire's oxygen supply was cut off, and the guardian's inferno began to wane. Lucas smirked, convinced that the battle was won. He wasn't aware that no examiner in the history of the guild had ever been hurt in the testing grounds, and he was determined to change that fact. His confidence, however, was met with steady resistance. The examiner dodged his fiery attacks with precision and countered with a flurry of earth shields and punches. When Lucas unleashed a devastating cluster of explosive fireballs, she barely managed to evade the onslaught. Suddenly, she caught him with a strong earth hand from behind. Lucas twisted and struggled, but a second hand emerged from his blind spot, grabbing him firmly. His offensive spells fizzled against her reinforced rock shield. The duel ended abruptly as Lucas crashed onto the floor, stunned and humbled. Though impressed by his abundant mana, the examiner noted Lucas's recklessness and lack of discipline. Just as it seemed the lesson was learned, Lucas ignited a surprise fire spell post-match, engulfing the examiner in flames. The augmenter swooped in, extinguishing the blaze with a wave of her hand. Lucas's fury was palpable. How dare someone interrupt his grand finale? The augmenter chastised him, reminding him that casting spells after the exam was a violation of the rules. Lucas arrogantly insisted it was all part of his plan, dismissing the examiner's authority. Emily, the examiner, reviewed his performance once more and begrudgingly admitted that despite his flaws, Lucas's raw control merited a B-class ranking. Frustrated, Lucas retreated to the stands, misinterpreting the congratulations of others as mockery. He slumped, hoping for his father's intervention. Then came Arthur's turn. Announced simply as note, he received a nod from Jasmine, a subtle but powerful gesture of support. Descending into the hall, Arthur steeled himself. Facing an experienced augmenter meant calculating every move carefully. He'd already spotted weaknesses in the man's technique, small openings waiting to be exploited. The augmenter eyed Arthur warily, knowing nothing of his background. He readied his blade, intending to test the boy's capabilities. But before the duel began, an overwhelming aura emanated from Arthur, causing the seasoned fighter's body to shiver involuntarily. The sheer force of his presence was like a seismic wave crashing through the room. Caspian, the branch head, intervened immediately, canceling the fight. He would personally assess Arthur. The room buzzed with surprise. Why would such a powerful figure take direct interest in a test candidate? The branch head assured George that this was no insult to his abilities, but a duty as sponsor to evaluate Arthur himself. Pointing his sword with authoritative precision, Caspian, a renowned AA-class adventurer known throughout Supon, signaled that this was no ordinary trial. Arthur's heart raced, but excitement lit his eyes. He was ready for the challenge. Caspian's initial strike was a blur, lightning fast. Arthur dodged, rolled, and weaved through a dance of steel and wind that captivated everyone watching. Each time Arthur prepared to counterattack, Caspian vanished like a shadow, reappearing unpredictably to test his reflexes. Despite his skill, Arthur's physical limitations were apparent compared to the battle-hardened master. His body trembled under the strain of keeping pace. Sensing this, Caspian infused his body with mana, the very air around them crackling as the fight escalated to a new level. Instinctively, Arthur wanted to retreat, but he fought to stay composed. The wind bullets Caspian unleashed were like bullets in a high-stakes FPS game, impossible to dodge without precision and timing. Arthur closed the distance, knowing this was his best chance. With a fierce yell, he unleashed a blazing strike that cleaved through the barrage. Fire met wind in a spectacular clash, the energy crackling like the climax of an epic battle scene. The examiners exchanged stunned glances. Caspian, the unbeatable veteran, was clearly challenged by this newcomer. His frustration boiled over, and his attacks grew wild and desperate. Jasmine's worried gaze tracked Arthur's every move. A near-lethal wind bullet zipped past Arthur's head, missed only by his quick reflexes. Cornered, Arthur drew on every ounce of his strength for one last, synchronized spell, a masterstroke that left the room breathless. Arthur's final assault was a thunderous piston stamp, each strike echoing like the booming bass drop at a packed EDM festival. He closed the distance between himself and Caspian with the confidence of a gamer going for the clutch. The branch master's eyes narrowed. He knew the fight was slipping away. Under normal circumstances, Arthur's raw talent would have crushed him here and now, but Caspian's pride was a stubborn beast. Instead of surrendering, he unleashed a gust of wind so powerful it stirred the very air of the arena, sweeping Arthur off his feet and tossing him into a vortex of swirling currents. The audience in the stands collectively held their breath, feeling the tempest ripple through the hall like a tornado hitting a city block. Jasmine, sensing danger, lunged to intervene, but Arthur was done playing defense. His mind flickered through every lesson, every tactic he'd learned. The ancient text spoke of lightning magic split into two, external bursts and the elusive internal currents that only a few could master. Most mages shy away from internal lightning because it demands perfect harmony between body and spirit. Arthur, though, wasn't like most. He charged his entire being with crackling electricity, the kind of raw energy that makes your phone battery explode when you overcharge it. His reflexes, sharpened beyond human limits, allowed him to dance through Caspian's wind assault like a dancer weaving through a mosh pit. With a ferocious roar, Arthur prepared to finish the fight in his electrified state. But then silence. Caspian lowered his blade and, with an uncharacteristic humility, apologized for his overzealous testing. "You dodged the smoke and mirrors," he admitted. "Your choice to mask your true power was a smart move." Arthur's nod confirmed the truth. He wanted to prove himself on his own terms, at the lowest possible rank. The decision was final. Caspian placed him firmly in B rank, leaving the rest of the candidates slack-jawed and whispering about the boy's monstrous abilities. Lucas was seething, Elijah, impressed beyond words. Caspian turned to Arthur with a rare smile. "Are you satisfied?" The boy's simple nod said it all. Jasmine quickly moved to check on Arthur, concern flickering in her eyes. Meanwhile, the examination hall buzzed as the final results were announced. Candidates were called to collect their adventurer cards at the reception desk. Later, Caspian retreated to his office, his mind swirling. That boy's determination wasn't just talent. It was a quiet storm, unsettling even the most seasoned veterans. He summoned Emily and George, the examiners, for an urgent meeting. Behind closed doors, Caspian reminded them of the tournament 6 months prior, when the long-standing ban on elves and dwarves was lifted. He pulled up a detailed dossier on the day's examinees. Lucas, the half-elf, came from a family notorious for producing fiery mages, despite their dark past as former elven slaves. Awakening at 8, Lucas had forged his path through grueling battles, yet had still hit a plateau despite powerful beast cores and elixirs. Elijah Knight remained a mystery. A dwarf-raised human, recently awakened, his abilities had already earned him a B rank, thanks to a trusted patron vouching for him. But the masked augmenter? The Flamesworth prodigy? Caspian had no data. His only clue was the boy's connection to the legendary Flamesworth family, famed for unleashing some of the continent's fiercest fire mages. Emily's eyes widened. "Flamesworth," she murmured. "That explains the fire magic." Caspian intended to make this revelation public soon, but warned them all to keep it under wraps for now. As they left, Caspian remained deep in thought, especially about his duel with the masked boy. His instincts told him that the boy's swordsmanship was what truly made him lethal. The magic was impressive, but the blade work? Next level. Caspian was excited, not just for the boy, but for the future of human mages rising alongside elves and dwarfs. Meanwhile, an elven girl lay on her bed, swirling in a mix of jealousy and longing. She had seen Arthur reunited with his family and treated well, but the attention he lavished on Lilia stung her pride. She regretted not showing Arthur a better time while he was around and resented how he treated her like a child. Just as these thoughts consumed her, an elder barged in without knocking. With a pillow in hand, she playfully smacked him. Her grandpa was the only one who could get away with such interruptions. He was ready to entertain her with promises of helping her attend the same academy as Arthur, a prospect that sent her heart racing. Her mother confirmed the connection. The academy director had been searching for a skilled elemental augmenter like her with 4 magic specializations. The process was complicated by upcoming continental tournaments and negotiations for elven training with humans. The director had also mentioned Arthur's 3-year enrollment, meaning that by the time she started, he'd already be a senior. Tesha's parents pressed her to train harder. She was destined to be part of the next generation. Back in the testing hall, Jasmine checked on Arthur, her dark eyes reflecting concern. Arthur's mind replayed the duel's moments, the thrill of the fight, the pressure, the respect for Caspian's skill. He wondered about Jasmine's own ties to the guild. She finally admitted that Caspian was an acquaintance of her father, a detail Arthur filed away. Just then, the receptionist called out for a note. Arthur moved forward, the remaining candidates watching, questioning if this quiet boy could really be a child. His duel report arrived shortly after. Arthur was handed his congratulatory adventurer card. Around him, whispers of awe rippled through the crowd. Even Sylvie, perched on his shoulder, seemed to glare at the distractions. The message was clear. It was time to stop clowning around and start training seriously. Jasmine slid her adventurer card across the rustic wooden table, her grin a perfect mix of pride and challenge, like someone showing off a rare collectible card at a convention. "Welcome to the squad," she said, eyes gleaming. Arthur caught his reflection in the table's polished surface and felt a strange mix of excitement and relief. Taking on the name note was more than a disguise. It was shedding the mundane grind of his old life and stepping into something bigger, like finally getting that limited edition game release after months of waiting. Their chat drifted to his recent sparring with Caspian, the branch head, and the brutal lesson it taught him. Arthur had buried himself in scrolls and spells, sinking deeply with Sylvia's will and refining control over fire, water, earth, and wind. Yet something tugged at him. His sword skills, sharp as ever back home, were gathering dust. It was like a top-tier player ignoring their melee class for flashy magic, and now questioning if they should switch back or master both. The dilemma felt like choosing between grinding solo dungeons or teaming up for PvP raids. Both essential, but time is the real enemy. Lost in thought, Arthur almost ran into Elijah Knight, the boy who had breezed through ranking without breaking a sweat. Elijah tossed a dismissive glance, like a streamer brushing off chat haters. "It's all right, I guess," he muttered, clearly confident he was already ahead. Then Lucas showed up, a textbook rival, loud, arrogant, full of swagger like an influencer hyping up a new drop. He mocked Arthur's rank like it was some early access beta batch. Arthur sighed, recognizing the same tired side characters from countless stories, predictable and forgettable. Elijah disappeared like a speedrunner skipping cutscenes, leaving Arthur to brace himself for the next round of nonsense. Jasmine shook her head with a half-smile. "Guild board quests? That's noob stuff, farming boring fetch missions." She pulled him aside to a shimmering portal leading to Beast Glades, a wild zone where low-level adventurers gathered to farm potion ingredients and grind easy monsters. Think of it like the new B zones in MMO games, safe, but full of side quests. They flashed their permits at the guards like VIP badges at a concert and stepped through. The lush greenery was like stepping into a beautifully rendered open-world game, but Arthur's epic expectations took a hit when a skunk sprayed him. Classic troll moment. Sylvie, his ever-hungry dragon, leapt off his shoulder, chasing a fox-like critter with the enthusiasm of a kid chasing the ice cream truck. Jasmine explained mana here was dense, kind of like strong Wi-Fi signal, making it easier for beast bonds to form, but they had to keep moving fast. The real challenges were deeper in the wilderness, a full day's trek away. Jasmine moved with the grace of a pro gamer, pulling off perfect combos, while Arthur struggled to keep up, his breath ragged like someone who pulled an all-nighter grinding levels. Thanks to Sylvia's mana rotation technique, a clever energy hack, he managed to hold pace. Jasmine, usually cool and calculating, actually smiled in approval. They paused often to catch their breath, the campfire glow from Arthur's fire magic turning the night into a cozy streaming session vibe. Jasmine wondered if Sylvia was feeling cooped up, like a gamer stuck in loading screens. Arthur reassured her their bond kept them synced. Hours later, Arthur finally asked what drove Jasmine to become adventurer. Her usual poker face cracked. "I wanted out," she said quietly. The Flamesworth family was known for its power and war legacy, but Jasmine's early awakening came with sky-high expectations she couldn't meet. Her family treated her like a glitchy character no one wanted. Instead, she mastered wind magic, wearing a disappointed look that felt like a gamer stuck on a brutal boss fight. Arthur burst out laughing. Ranking mages by elements? That's like rating gamers by their skins. No one's OP all the time. Jasmine chuckled, amused by his fiery spirit. People here love their status symbols as much as their spells. Arthur thought of his old world, where mana was just a mechanic. Here, it was politics and power. Suddenly, Jasmine's stick caught fire. She yanked Arthur's hand, dousing the flames with his water magic. They collapsed onto the grass, exhaustion and companionship settling in. Jasmine confessed doubts about being his guardian. She wasn't the usual mentor type. Arthur was surprised by her vulnerability. "You're exactly what I need, a reality check." Her face lit up. They shared a laugh. For a moment, their burdens felt lighter. Jasmine joked that talking to him didn't feel like babysitting, but a real partnership. There was complete silence, the night stretching on as Jasmine assumed Arthur had already drifted off. But in Arthur's mind, the echo of her words lingered, tangled with thoughts he couldn't voice. Morning broke with a harsh jolt, a nightmare dragging him back through memories. He blinked to see Sylvie, but the creature before him was no cute dragon. It looked like something straight out of a low-budget sci-fi flick, all weird angles and glowing eyes. He shoved it away, only to realize it wasn't Sylvie at all, but some grotesque beast lurking in the shadows. Jasmine was already up, greeting the morning with a cheerfully practical, "Good morning, sleepyhead." Arthur scowled, annoyed she hadn't roused him sooner to share the chore load. She shrugged, amused. "Hey, I did my part." "You were out cold, like someone who just run a marathon, in full armor." Breakfast was a humble affair, but Arthur's mood lifted when he asked Sylvie to join. Amusingly, the little dragon had already hunted down and bagged breakfast, proving she was more than capable of looking out for herself. They shared a quiet meal, preparing for the day ahead. Jasmine cut to the chase, pulling out her blade with a flick that caught the light like a gamer loading their ultimate weapon. "I brought you here to fight. Not the usual dungeon crawl. You need to work on your stance. It's like your body's running a laggy connection and can't quite sync with your moves." Arthur winced, recalling the sparring with Caspian where his own limbs felt like lagging pixels. "So, what's the plan?" "First, your physical skills. Mana's great, but if your sword arm's off, you'll get wrecked out there." She looked him dead in the eye. "I want you to focus all your mana into your real sword." Arthur reached for the stick he'd been using, a training tool that felt more like a child's prop than a weapon. Jasmine's tone sharpened. "No, the real sword. Don't pretend." He blinked, stunned she guessed. "How'd you?" "Personality tells all. Plus, practical gear beats flashy illusions." She smirked. With resolve, Arthur unsheathed the sword. The blade shimmered a mystical teal, like a legendary skin dropped just for him. Jasmine's eyebrows lifted in genuine surprise. The duel began. Arthur charged with the aggressive spirit of someone rushing a raid boss, but Jasmine blocked every strike with twin blades, moving like a speedrunner through a boss fight. His forward thrusts were countered effortlessly. His sword felt like he was playing with outdated controls, clunky and unresponsive. It was clear his magic had been his crutch. Jasmine's flurry of attacks left Arthur scrambling, defense flailing as exhaustion crept in. His mind raced. He'd been so laser-focused on magic that his melee skills had faded to background noise. Fighting like this felt like switching from a sniper rifle to a malfunctioning shotgun mid-match. Finally, gasping and sweat-drenched, Arthur conceded. Jasmine's verdict was both praise and warning. She admired his innate talent but called out his awkward movements, like watching a newbie try to clutch at pro-level combos without mastering the basics. She suspected he was holding back, her restraint as deliberate as a player pacing themselves before a boss rush. Arthur's ambition burned bright. Waiting years to level up his sword skills wasn't an option. He planned to ditch the mana boost and train like an old-school swordsman. Jasmine nearly laughed, thinking he was crazy. Dungeons without mana? That's like trying to stream in 4K with dial-up. Arthur grinned. 2 years. That's all I need to overcome the gap. This is the end of Season 1 of this series. If you want us to cover Season 2, please mention art in the comments down below. Thank you all for your incredible support to the channel. If you enjoy our content, please consider subscribing. It really helps us grow and bring more exciting stories to you. We'll be back soon with even more thrilling episodes. Until then, stay awesome, stay safe, and cheers.
He'll rise as a legend,